the South Burlington Development Review Board meeting of December 7th, 2021. My name is Dawn Philibert, and I'm the chair of the board, and I'd like to introduce the other board members who are with us tonight. Starting over here, Mark Baer, Quinn Mann, Jim Langen, Stephanie Wyman, Frank Kochman, and Dan Albrecht. Thank you all for attending, and I'd like to remind you that there are a variety of ways for people to participate in this hearing. People can attend in person, as you folks have done. People can attend via their phone, pardon me, and they can also live stream this, and it's also recorded, so people can watch it after the fact. But if you want to be considered a participant, we ask that if you're here, you sign in at the back table. And if you're not here but want to be considered a participant, please send a notice to the person I forgot to introduce after I introduced board members, Marla Keene, our development review planner, and also Delilah Hall, our zoning administrator. So please send an email to Marla Keene, MKEENE at South Burlington, sburl.com.
Yep.
sburl.com. Thank you.
We're in a transition with our email addresses right now, so sburl.com or sbvt.gov,
Okay.
both work.
Okay, thank you. A couple of reminders about participating. If you're viewing this, streaming this, please keep your microphones muted and camera off unless you are actively participating in the item before the board. If you wish to participate during the public comment period, turn on your camera and raise your hand. You may unmute when recognized by the chair. And the chat function online is for administrative matters only. Comments submitted in the chat will not be recognized as part of the meeting record. Therefore, it's just for our use. Emergency evacuation procedures at the back of the room. In each corner, there are exit doors. Exit the door, and you can either go left or right. And there are doors to the parking lot in the front of the building. I don't have the notes that I usually have, so I hope I'm not skipping anything. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes to the order of agenda items, board members? Okay, hearing none. Announcements. Do we have any announcements, Marla?
Oh, I suppose I should announce that the city council now requires masking in all city-owned buildings. This resolution includes exceptions for people with a disability who cannot safely wear a face covering, any person eating and drinking, or a person for whom wearing a face covering would create a risk to workplace health, safety, or job duty. Additionally, you are not required. Okay, that's about if you work here.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Can you all hear me
Yes.
with the mask on? Okay, thank you. All right. Are there any comments and questions from the public that are not related to the items on the agenda that we'll be reviewing tonight? Hearing none, let us move ahead to our first project, and that is continued site plan application SP 21039 of South Village Communities, LLC, to provide a replacement plan for trees and shrubs that were improperly removed. The plan consists of installing a heavily landscaped passive recreation area and walking path between Aiken Street and Spear Street, east of the existing paved recreation path at 1840 Spear Street. Are there any board members who need to recuse themselves or disclose a conflict of interest for this project? No. Okay, thank you. Who is here for the applicant?
Patrick O'Brien here representing South Village Communities LLC.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm going to swear you in. Raise your right hand, please. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury? Thank you. Okay. Patrick, give us we have a long agenda tonight, so give us please a very brief overview of what you're proposing.
Okay, thank you very much for your time, everybody. What we're proposing, I have to ask, are what you looking at, what I'm looking at,
Yes.
your screen, same as
Yes.
my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, and who is running? Okay, thank you, Delia. All right, so in front of you, what you have is two buildings known as lots 4A and 4B of South Village, and now more formally known as Aiken Street Flats because they are under construction. Those sit on two specific lots. The red dots are 4A and 4B. To my right, which is probably your left, I'm guessing, is the area of question. A little further towards the edge of the page is Spear Street, thank you. The other street in the picture on the other side of the two buildings is Aiken Street, which is a public street, which is part of the South Village Street Network. When we started South Village, when we started this project, we wanted to go into that small stand of trees and shrubs and remove invasive species and some of the dead and diseased and dying trees. And unfortunately, more were taken than intended, and that's why we are here this evening. What is in front of you is a site plan on a common open land of South Village communities. The site plan basically consists of between, I think there may be 28 or 31 trees. Last time you saw this application, for those of you that were on the board, there was also some shrubs that were in the landscape plan, and there was also a meandering walking path that went through this area that started on the bike path and then ended on the bike path. And in there was some benches. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend that evening, but regardless, this board tasked me with going and talking to the South Village boards to see what their feedback was. I did meet with the boards, the homeowners association board and the stewardship board, which manages, one of their tasks is to manage the invasive species in all of the open spaces at South Village. And the feedback from those meetings is a result of the plan in front of you. They felt that first, they did not want a walking path. There was already, for those of you who don't know, 7 miles of trail sidewalks and walking and quiet paths at South Village. And it's somewhat of a burden on the HOA dues, and so they felt that they didn't want to add to that. Secondly, what they asked me to propose was to not have the shrubs and rather put more trees in. And so really, the only other change was we had also proposed a mix of wildflowers and clover to plant in and around the trees that you see. And they felt that they really didn't prefer to have that specific mix, and it would really just rather be clover. And a lot of that boils down to maintenance costs. So the intent of this plan is you'll see an area up there that has a squiggly line around it. If you were to zoom in on that, there's a label that says that is the remaining trees. If I were to paint a picture of those trees, there's maybe 1 or 2 or 3 that are greater than 6-inch diameter at chest high. I think they may be elm trees. They're straggly. They're being choked by vines. A lot of the rest of that is an invasive species, your typical buckthorn, which you see mostly. So the other thing that the board tasked me to do was come up with a management plan. And so what I did is just that. And basically what we think is the best scenario to do here is to, before we plant these, is to go in and remove those invasives, stump those invasives, take care of all the invasives, and then the next step would be come into plant. So that's the general area, the general thought. That's why we're here tonight. If it's okay, what I'd like to do is just dive right into the staff notes unless there's any more specific questions about the plan in front.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead, Frank.
Just for clarification, because I don't think I was at the meeting. Wasn't the direction to go to restore, from the board, to restore the trees that were removed and to come up with a management plan for those trees? This looks more like an amendment to the project, rather than a correct. It doesn't look like a correction. It looks like an amendment to the plan that would require a notice.
Marla.
I mean, unless the board feels this is within some broad reading of correcting their error in removing the trees that weren't supposed to be removed.
For what it's worth, the way I read this is not as cool, interesting, fun as the original proposal. But had they come to us with this plan originally, we would have looked at this and said, they are proposing to plant trees to rectify the error in removing trees, and would have proceeded. So that's why I didn't feel that it needed to be a new application, because it still meets the purpose of rectifying improperly removed trees. But the board may feel differently. The board's direction was to talk to the HOA and come up with a management plan, and that's what this is the result of those actions.
Thank you, Marla. Other board members or Frank?
And I would say if it was proposing plantings substantially outside of a pre-existing area of plantings, and that would be a material change, but I don't really think it's
So you're not of the opinion that it's a material change?
correct.
Other board members?
No, I would say as long, they're staying within the same confines of the original wooded area. They're just proposing a different way of resolving it, and we have to review whether we feel they've done that or not. I think if they were getting rid of it in its entirety or adding new area to it, then that would be a substantive change that would require a new warning.
Well, let me be, I don't know if devil's advocate, but devil's advocate, contrary to that view, perhaps. I don't know what's on the other side of Aiken Drive. Are there people over there who would prefer to have screening rather than nothing?
In the plant, so Aiken is on the right, so on the far side of the buildings. Spear Street is on the left.
Is that what you mean, Frank? The house is on the
Left.
other side of Spear Street?
Yeah, well, it says, the plan consists of installing a heavily landscaped passive recreation area and walking path between Aiken Street and Spear Street, east of the existing paved recreation path. Is that what he's done here?
Yeah.
No
Well,
longer-
except it doesn't include the walking path
yeah,
any
there's no
longer.
a path.
Where were the trees removed from?
Do you see the green wavy line on the plan that Delilah has up? So there's the black wavy line, and then there's the green wavy line that she's
Oh,
highlighting
okay.
now. That's the area where the trees were removed, between that and the...
Oh, okay. That eliminates my concern about neighbors. There are no neighbors to be concerned about, it looks like.
Well, I would say the neighbors to be concerned about are the public on Spear Street, as well as the neighbors across the street from Spear Street, which this existing shrubs and clumps of trees and junk stuff was screening the two large multifamily buildings.
Right.
So I would say that that's also, the screening was not for the residents at South Village, but for the public and the public right-of-way.
All right, so the issue then is whether what he's proposed really is an adequate replacement for that screening.
Right, that's what I'm.
So perhaps we'll hear from some members of the public tonight.
Yeah.
We'll see. Okay,
And if not, it's up to us to decide.
okay. Are you okay with that, Frank?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. So the first staff comment, staff considers construction sequencing and planting notes are not part of a management plan and should instead be removed from the management plan and provided on the landscaping drawing. Can you do that?
Yeah, absolutely, that's fine.
Okay. The next two comments refer to invasive species and the removal of the invasive species. I'm wondering, Patrick, what your thoughts are about these two comments, which are very related.
Yes, they are. And it's also a little bit related to, I think, the last comment that we will get to under site plan review 1406 6. But regardless, we can talk about that when we get there. But so here's my thought on the sequencing. It's just not my thought. I did talk to a fellow by the name of Bob Hymans, who manages for the South Village boards the removal of all the invasive species on the site. And if I understand right, the question really is, should the board allow the applicant to remove the invasive species before the plantings are put there? Or should they put a condition in that we wait a number of years to let the ones we are planting establish themselves because they don't want to take out additional screening? So what I would, my feeling and Mr. Hyman's feelings are that if we don't get rid of the invasives now, they're going to reseed it. They're going to seed out every year, and so that'll just make the struggle even more difficult. That was the first point. The second point, and I'm not going to get into the amount of work it takes to remove most of the invasives, which are out in the Woolly Wax and the Great Swamp and all over South Village. We have an opportunity here to do it at this time when we are in there and we are pulling the stumps of all of the trees that were cut, to also pull the root systems of the invasives, and rather than having to treat them with an organic chemical, if that is even, I think that might be an oxymoron, but regardless, we could do it mechanically. I do understand that it creates this nuance. So I do recall reading here that there was also some thought that the board might require some additional screening. So my feeling would be, we are happy. I looked at the landscape budget, which is in your package, and my feeling is if thank you, you'll see on here that we've got two species of evergreen, a balsam fir and a Canadian hemlock, and they are they're roughly $525 a piece to plant. And so my feeling is, if you could go back to the landscape plan, please, Delilah, or the planting plan. My feeling is there's two things, is that if the board wanted to condition us to plant 10 or 12 additional evergreens in that area, we would be absolutely fine with that. And I think that basically takes care of both of the issues of being able to take out the invasives, their root systems, not having them seed out, and also enhance the screening.
So you would take out the invasives, plant the evergreens, but also plant the trees.
Yes, and,
Okay.
and there's an important note. I don't know if anybody has caught this, but go up where that next one, upper left-hand corner, it's highlighted in white, and it should say that the it's the approximate locations of the plantings. So, and I'm just saying that because I know going through some of the board members' minds might be, well, how do we know where exactly they're gonna put these plants if we give them a condition that they've gotta plant 10 more? And I think that, I know, you know, we like to be as accurate as possible in our approvals. But if there's any way that it could be worded that there's additional plantings, evergreen plantings required in the location that of the remaining trees. You guys come up with the wording, I don't, you know, but nonetheless, that's kind of my feeling on it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do any board members have any questions about Patrick's response to 2 and 3? Go ahead, Mark.
So, I mean, it sounds to me like if what you're proposing and what you've testified is that in that remaining existing vegetative area, there's about 1 to 3 trees that are above 6 inches in caliper. And most likely the rest of it, it's probably junk or invasive. So,
No, I would say it's not, there's quite a bit of it that is non-invasive.
okay.
But the majority of it, you're absolutely right, Mark.
Right.
It is, yes.
So, I mean, it sounds to me like what we're really looking at is we have that, the squiggly area of the existing to remain. There's not gonna be much remaining once you're all said and done.
And what is this then? Yes.
Right, other than those few trees and then some non-invasive. So, I mean, if when if we're planning or if we're discussing getting rid of everything all at once and pretty much establishing everything, I'm not sure if 10, you know, balsam firs or evergreens in a essentially 300-foot length that's gonna be essentially removed will do much. I'm wondering if we need more than that, if the intention was to correct a wrong. So that's just sort of something I'm putting out there. I'm not sure if once we get rid of all of that, that's gonna really do much.
Sure. You know, you're right, we did create a wrong and that's why we're here to fix it.
I
So,
understand that.
so certainly, my eyesight is not as good as it used to be, but I'm trying to determine which ones are the maples and the firs.
In your proposals,
Yeah, on the screen, yes. I just wanted to have everybody have so they're the ABs and the TCs.
Well, but over a 300-foot length, I mean, Mark's point is that it doesn't matter which one are the maples and the firs.
No, I know, I was just kind of getting an idea of, so again, you know, if, I also don't have my calculator on me, but,
Well, maybe we could go back to the cost chart again, because it didn't look like 500 a pop. For the firs, it looked like, unless I misread it. I guess I'd like to see it again if we could.
well, it's unit cost. Installed cost is different.
Unit cost versus installed.
Yeah, we look at installed cost.
I see what you mean.
The way they've done their table is a little funny because they've given the unit price and then just multiplied it by the number, right? No, it's not. Okay, sorry.
They should have a labor or
There
install
should be
price
another
as well.
column that says
Yeah,
installed
there
price,
is, yeah.
installed price extended, yeah.
so the bottom line is the hemlocks, which there are 3 of. The unit price to purchase them is $210. Installed price is $1575, which you divide by 3 and come out with $525.
Right. Yeah, I was looking at unit prices.
Right. Well, let me ask Marla, is there a monetary, like when we discuss landscape budgets, we typically tie it to construction costs, you know, but when it comes to this type of thing, do we have a monetary value that we have to hit, or is it just purely what it takes to rectify the,
So
the issue?
the regulations are, leave open some interpretation. The board's interpretation in the past has been, well, first of all, the board has the authority to allow credit for existing trees to remain as part of required landscaping plan. So trees that remain become integrated into the required landscaping plan and have to be maintained. which is, Patrick knows, and that's how they got here in the first place. So then the board in the past has allowed applicants, when they were coming in advance, to cut down a tree because they want to put in a building, to calculate the installed value of that tree based on this Purdue methodology, which takes into account all kinds of factors, the quality of the tree's appropriateness for the location, the size of the tree, the amount of canopy it provides, all these different factors, and comes up with a dollar value based on the market rate of like a 2-inch tree of the same species. Delilah, can you speak to, I guess I don't quite remember, but I think you had determined that there was no way we were going to be able to back into that number on this project?
Yes, I think for all the points that Marla listed in that formula, that there would be no way to put, if you did all that math, to put that amount of trees back into the space.
Right.
So,
Well, and there was trouble like figuring out that number too.
and yeah,
right?
and then and then because we didn't have the luxury of examining all the trees that were felled, we wouldn't really have a good basis for that formulation.
Let me make a suggestion, because it seems to me we don't need to analyze it in such a refined fashion if we can get agreement from the developer. We just do it. And asking Mark, he said 10 or 12. If we had 15 trees over 300 feet, they'd be 20 feet apart. Does that feel adequate to you?
Well, I don't think that what we're looking to do is do like, one tree every 30 feet or one tree every 15 feet and do a, row, because we're not looking, that's not going to look natural. I think we need to get, who's it, TJ Boyle that did your plan? Get them to put together sort of a proposed plan that adds planting, because you're definitely planning and proposing removing what's remaining essentially, and that re-achieves the goal of creating this screened hedgerow. If they hadn't removed the trees, we wouldn't even be having this discussion.
Right.
So we're looking to recreate it. Now, we know it's not gonna happen on day one, but we have to have something that provides a pretty plausible, realistic goal of in 5 years, 7 years, whatever, it's going to provide adequate screening and redo what was removed.
And it doesn't seem like we ought to be constrained
No.
by the original landscaping budget.
There's
we
not
should-
an original landscaping budget. That's what I was trying to get at, is that we're not looking at a number that they have to hit. They have to correct this to the satisfaction of the board, and then the cost is secondary. Not to you, I understand that, but it's secondary to our review.
But it shouldn't be ridiculous, in my
Right,
point was,
I
we're
agree.
not-
It shouldn't
we're
be-
not suggesting
No.
something ridiculous. It was
Nope.
just maybe.
I'm not. I'm just saying I don't think 10 trees is going to do it over 300 feet. So I'm saying is I think they need to come back to us with a revised plan. If we're going to be agreement with them that getting rid of all the invasive species and clearing out the junk shrub trees and start from scratch on day one is the correct direction, which I agree with you. I don't think waiting 5 years, because you're just going to allow the invasive species to continue and could start affecting the new plantings. I think we need to get a proposed landscape plan that starts from day one with a new planting plan that within 5 years, 7 years, I don't know what the number is, corrects this removal.
I like that.
Did someone?
I was just looking, just not knowing enough about the trees. I mean, the mature width here is saying they're 25 feet. I don't know how long it takes to get there, but, then we're talking maybe, I know we don't want a wall, but 12 trees at 25-foot width, would cover 300 feet, but if it's gonna take 40 years to get there.
Right, and also you don't
but-
want a rhythmic pattern.
Right.
You want it to be clumps
Yeah.
of different trees, species, so that when it starts to fill in, it has more of a natural look to it.
So Patrick, what would you be willing to offer or
Well,
suggest?
my first offer of clarity is I may be incorrect on this, but I do think I read that one of the requirements was that we replace the approximate amount of trees that were removed. And I believe Craig Lambert went out and counted the stumps, and that's how we ended up with the amount that we're proposing. But regardless of that, I would say that the interest of this board's time, I would prefer a conditions of approval with the number of trees that Frank suggests be interspersed along and throughout that area. And that condition could be further refined to make sure that the intent is very clear, that they're not in a line, like Mark suggests.
What did you suggest, Frank? 15 trees?
Well, I was just doing simple arithmetic.
Yeah.
I said
I
15
don't-
trees at 20-foot intervals, but
Yeah.
that's how my mind works.
Okay.
was-
I'm not comfortable doing a condition with a set number of trees at this point without seeing it, because you're talking about a large area. It's not like some of the other things we talked about where we've got a 40 or 50-foot gap that we're filling in. We know we can do them
Right.
4 feet on center, 6-foot arborvitae is going to create a hedgerow, and that's the purpose. This one, it's a totally different intention of what we're trying to achieve.
So you're suggesting that we will go through the rest of the comments, but that we conclude this for tonight and have Patrick come back?
Continue it to.
Okay,
I think we need to see this revised plan.
okay. Marla?
I just had a kind of a suggestion. I know it's not really my place, but what if, as they lay out the additional trees, you kind of think about sightlines? So you want to make it so that there's no, as you're coming down Spear Street, there's a tree somewhere in this area at all points. So they don't need to be in a
Yeah.
line, but they
No, I
should
agree.
be, you know, as
That's
we
what I'm
shoot
saying, is
through,
we're
there's
looking
no
at
gaps.
what we're seeing, what we're trying to block, what we're trying to screen. That's what I'm saying, you don't want it to be a line of trees.
Right.
You want it to have clumps, you want it to, you know, there's certain areas where you could probably, where you're driving down either north or south down Spear Street or up Spear Street, you know, if you clump them in one area, you're gonna block the predominance of the two buildings. Coming the other way, you know, so I think, but I think we need to see it, we can't just say
Right. So we're
condition.
trying to achieve function and also some aesthetic with this. Okay, all right.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I just wanted to address the larger issue that seems to be implicit in staff comment 2 and 3. And I guess my first question is for staff. Does a property owner have the right to remove invasive species?
If they're not part of an approved landscaping plan.
So because this clump here has invasive species in it, it was part of an approved plan, then every removal of invasive species has to be vetted by the board?
I think that, you know, in the case of South Village, since they have an invasive species management plan, if they were removing invasive species in a limited way that didn't sort of disrupt the purpose of this treed area, you know, we would consider it to be allowed. But since it went too far, or it sounds like from what Patrick's saying, that if they were to continue removal of invasive species, there would be almost nothing left. You know, that would no longer meet the purpose of retaining these existing woods, which were specifically mentioned
Okay.
as screening in one of the original
Right,
decisions.
thanks. And then, I mean, I guess I'll just say I find myself supportive of the idea of if we were to allow a faster invasive species removal than the initial staff comments, then Patrick's offer of putting in some additional plantings, then, you know, I would look favorably on that there, so, but I won't belabor the point, thanks.
I think the real issue before us is whether we're gonna delay decision in deference to Mark's suggestion.
Well, they're not going to
That-
plant until spring anyway.
Right.
I'm sorry?
There's no reason to plant until spring. You can't plant when the ground's
So
frozen.
there's nothing pressing about time here.
No, plus I get to see you all.
Okay, so-
Yeah. We miss you.
flattery will get you nowhere.
Yes, a couple of suggestions, really, that's, in order, in what my brain is saying, let's do this right. So what I think you should task me to do is, Mr. Hyman has already been out to the site on more than one occasion. And the reason is because I feel it's important for a third party to be involved along with the city arborist to make sure that the remaining invasives that are taken out, that's not my decision. So what I think we should do is table this meeting. I will contact Mr. Hymans. I will have him flag the invasives. That way I will have a better idea where the holes are gonna be created, and therefore come back with not an estimated number of trees that might be required, but also knowing where they could be. Let's let that dictate where these trees are gonna be.
Yeah, that's what I was sort of saying, is let's not give them 15 trees in a line, let's have them come back and propose based on real-world conditions.
Or you could come up with a condition and I will do that anyways.
So are you suggesting that we not review the rest of the staff reports?
Well, I think we should be, just because if there's other nuances you want me to come
Okay.
back with and address.
Okay, good. So let's look at numbers 4 and 5, which refer to the maintenance plan. Maybe we don't need to do that. You can come back to us and talk to us about the management
No,
plan.
I would like to talk about that, just because when I come back, I don't want to have to table again. So
Okay.
what it said, the management plan does not assign responsibility for maintenance. Staff recommends that the board require responsibility for maintenance to be assigned in the plan. So, and I just seek a little clarity here. Like, for example, any other landscaping tied to approval is also tied to a bonding requirement, which we will have here. And if it's a street tree, we know the city takes care of it. If it's not a street tree, what happens is the eventual owner or the association will be responsible for the ultimate maintenance of it after the 3 years. And so that is the answer to that question. And I'm just, my question is, that answer sufficient enough? Is that the type of answer you're looking for? Okay,
Think so.
great, fantastic.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on, several pages later, number 6 refers to insufficient screening. Seems like that's part of the earlier discussion.
Yes, and again, really, and that was my big question on this one is the question intent that I need to meet the same in the previous discussion, wherein let's try to make it look like they were naturally grown, not planted in a line, and so they can just fill in over time. I don't necessarily understand that number 6 any other way, and I'm just seeking clarity on that.
Marla, unless you have something else in mind, I think this is rolled into what
Yeah.
we've already said.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
You understood it correctly.
Yep,
So,
okay.
to be more specific, it says, like, do you want lower shrubs? I guess that's the big question. Keep in mind, your evergreens are gonna be down low to the ground
Right.
anyways.
How low to the ground?
Well, you know how an evergreen, when we plant them, their branches are really low
Oh, yes.
versus a deciduous with the branches.
Right,
that-
okay,
so-
yep.
And what I was gonna say is, I think the evergreens will satisfy, if the intent of those shrubs was to make so the ground would be visual under the trees, that evergreens would take care of that.
Okay.
Yeah, and as they grow taller, they're gonna go wider and create
Sure.
more of a
We good with
ground
that,
cover
Board?
view.
Okay. All right, moving on to number 7. This, staff considers this criterion further supports that a mix of evergreen and deciduous trees should be provided. I think we've covered that. Number 8, staff recommends the board determine, given the provided plans and testimony, as well as any additional testimony the applicant wishes to provide, whether the board finds the criteria of 13.06C and by extension 1407F to be met. I was having a hard time figuring this out.
Sorry, this is like nested criteria. So 13.06C says, 14.07 says, the requirements of 13.06 shall be met. 13.06 says, landscaping shall provide screening between multifamily and lower density residential uses. And so, and then 3.06C 1 through 5 here talks about how that screening what it should be like. So I think that this comment's really already been discussed.
Okay. And providing a bond, are you willing to do that? Okay, good. Number 10, staff recommends the board ask the applicant whether they still wish to request these modifications that are listed.
And the answer to that question is yes.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. And-
Wait, can we pause on that one? I just need to remind myself what those requests were, because I was expecting the answer to be no. So they requested that they remove the invasives, and then they are requesting a condition that they can replace trees on the landscaping plan as approved by the city arborist based on supply chain. Okay, and we talked about that already and how there'd be some limitations on that, same size, shape, and nature, okay.
Good. Okay, well, I think that we know we're headed toward you coming back again, but I think what we'd like to do is take public comment now. Are there any members of the public? Yes, please come forward, state your name and.
Okay. My name is Bo Denham. I'm on the South Village HOA, and I was one of the ones who worked with Patrick on working these designs. And I want to say that he was very cooperative throughout the whole process. We're really happy with the outcome. We like the fact that there's seasonal interest throughout the year with all the plantings. There's some flowering plants and there's evergreens, there's birches. We're quite happy with that. We feel like it'll blend in well to the north and south, which is now currently a park-like setting as you walk along the recreation path. So we think that'll fit in nicely with what's there. And I was responding primarily to your concerns about screening. And walking by there and doing kind of an inventory of what's there, it's all deciduous. So from November until May, you have no screening whatsoever. This new plan will put in evergreens that will give you more screening later on. I mean, granted, it's going to be a little bit different for a while, but I think the planning ultimately will be much better. It'll look a lot nicer. So basically, just in support of that, and hoping that we could do it all at once. And my thought was coming back 3 years later after you've done this planting, trying to remove stumps and things would be very disruptive, and you're basically starting all over again. So if it could all be done at once, that would be my.
Okay. And tell us again, do you live there?
I do. Yes.
Okay, good.
Oh, and one other thing, if you look at the buckthorn, the height of the buckthorn is max height of 20 feet. If you look at the grade difference between the buildings on Aiken Street and where they are right now, it's about 20 feet. So you're not really getting much screening out of the buckthorns.
Okay,
Yeah, the maples have a pretty narrow canopy too. So.
right, sure. Thank you. Are there any other members of the audience tonight who would like to provide public comment? And do we have any indication online, Delilah, that there's anyone, or on the phone? Okay, thank you. So do we vote on concluding this? No.
No, we're going to make a motion to continue. How long do you think you need?
With the holidays, I think we should shoot for early February if we're approved. I'm just doing the math. Because in all honesty, we would like to do the clearing and grubbing when the ground falls in disruption.
Yep.
So if we could come in early February, get approval 30 days out, that will allow us to do it in March and April, and then go in there and just get into the thing.
Keep in mind, the board won't issue their decision when you're heard. They'll issue the decision at their next deliberation.
And you're also assuming you're coming in with the right plan.
Let's assume he's coming in with the right plan.
Yeah, yeah,
With this new direction.
right.
So we've had a motion. Do we have a
Wait, we
second?
haven't made a motion
Haven't
for
made
a
a motion
specific
for a
date.
time.
I'm sorry.
So given the 30-day appeal period and that there has been some neighbor participation, I wouldn't expect you to be able to waive the appeal. Can I recommend, do you think you can be ready for January 18th?
Yes.
Okay.
I make a motion, we continue this application to January 18th.
Second. Second, thank you, Frank.
Thank you all very much.
Any discussion? All in favor of continuing this to January, say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Patrick.
Thank you. Have a good holidays. We'll see you after.
Okay. The next project is continued use application CU 2104 of Mike McGinnis, pardon me, to reconstruct and expand an existing attached garage on a lot occupied by an existing single-family home. The proposed expansion includes increasing the length and height of a portion of the structure that is located less than 5 feet from the adjacent side property line, 13 White Place. Let me just get the project up in front of me here. Who is, pardon me, who is here for the applicant, please?
Yep, my name is Mike McGinnis. I'm the homeowner. My wife, I believe, is on the phone. She was wrangling our 2-year-old to bed. And we also have Missa from Hinge, who is our architect.
I'm going to ask you to pull the microphone closer. It's to
Sorry,
your,
is
it's
this
hard to
better?
hear you, but thank
You
you.
can pull the whole thing too. It's easier.
Sorry?
I'm having trouble finding this. Give me just a second. Would you please give us a?
We need to swear everyone who's going to be testifying in first.
Okay. I'm sorry, thank you. Would you and your wife raise your right hands, please? And do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
Yes.
Thank you. Did I hear?
I do.
Yes, okay.
I do.
Thank you. Okay, and are there any members of the board who have a disclosure of conflict or need to recuse themselves? No, okay. Now, if you could please give us a brief overview of your project.
Yeah, so what we have is a single-family home. It's about 850 square feet, and we're looking for space, right? So we love our neighborhood. We love the R4 district. It's super neighborhood. We have a bunch of friends and family, well, not family, but friends on the street. It's a very family-friendly street, so we really want to stay. So we started looking at different additions, sort of, going out the back versus, building off the garage, things of that nature. Do the layout and the configuration of the house. It's a little bit easier to go off the garage and basically take it down completely, build a crawl space underneath, and go up 2 floors. This would provide us with 2 bathrooms, a bedroom, laundry upstairs, mudroom. So, it would really enhance the house. So, unfortunately, because it is a small lot, this house is sort of right in the smack middle. It basically puts us into that encroachment of the east border with our neighbors. So we're
Okay.
here to try to hopefully get a conditional use to allow us to move forward with building both basically moving the garage to be flush with the house on the north side, and then building the 2-story addition in place.
Okay, thank you. So you have read the staff report, I'm sure?
Yep.
Okay. What we're going to do now is go through the comments and have board members either ask you questions or comment.
Yeah, perfect.
So the first comment is, let's see, in light of these facts, staff recommends the board discuss whether they find the proposed expanded encroachment has an undue adverse effect on the adequacy of on-site parking. Staff considers the board may wish to require the applicant to maintain the existing driveway length. Staff considers that the board may be able to work with the applicant to develop a specific enough solution to allow this to be addressed as a condition of approval. What are your thoughts? Can we work something out?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely open to working something out. I think that initially we had reached out to see if there was a requirement on number of parking spaces for an R4 district, and we were told that there was not a specific requirement for a number of spaces. So that led us to sort of create the design that we brought forward with Missa and Hinge to basically bring it flush with the house, which then technically does reduce the number of parking, I think, from 3 to 1, right? And without parking in the right of way.
Okay.
Because the lot is so short, if we were to fit 2 spaces in the right of way, you're basically, if you created like a parallel parking space, you would probably be inches from both the front porch and the front of the house. And that's without parking in the right of way if it was sort of nestled right up against the house. So it is something that on like a snowy day, and because we do have the seasonal parking bans, we can fit our cars in the garage, or sorry, not in the garage, in the driveway, without going past the existing front of the house, if that makes sense.
Quick
So-
question, how many cars do you have?
2.
Okay, so,
So we are able to park off street.
no, I know, I
Yeah.
know that. So,
Not after December 1st.
Well, no, we're able to park both cars in the driveway.
well, now you are, obviously, but if this gets built, doesn't look like there'd be room for 2 cars.
Yeah,
Sure.
Can I sort of
I know there's no
clarify?
standard, but I'm just trying to like,
Yeah, so on the drawing that Delilah has up, they've got 2 dimensions shown for the driveway. So this is the proposed. The darker gray is the proposed expansion. The lighter gray are the existing structures. The driveway is 22 feet, 8.5 inches from long as measured from the right of way. Measured from the edge of the road, the driveway is 35 feet, 7.25 inches. So what Mike is talking about is, if you think about the part of the driveway that they technically own, then they only have room for 1 car. But
Oh,
they have
okay.
35 feet between the proposed expansion and the road, which, in the staff report, we kind of gave some examples. It was really fun looking up lengths of cars. You can get a Honda Fit, which is like 15 feet long, or you can get an F-150, which is 22 feet long. So it, kind of really depends on what kind of car you
okay,
have,
all
whether
right,
you
so,
can
all
fit
right,
one or 2.
that helps clarify, then my concerns are addressed as somebody who lives on Proctor, so I know all about, well, the right of way is out right in front of my door, so.
I mean,
I
the
get
other
it.
option obviously is you can widen your existing driveway. I don't think you can widen the curb cut, but you can pull in and widen it so that you can fit 2 cars side by side.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys are okay with widening it within the right of way, then that's definitely an option. It's when you get into widening it within our property line outside of the right of way, that's where it gets really tight.
Yeah.
So
But just to be clear, right now, at least in my neighborhood, people are technically parking on the right of way right now, all over
Right.
that entire neighborhood.
Right,
And,
I don't have
and it's allowed.
right. So if Mike and Samantha
We're not
both
interfering with the
chose-
plow, we're not interfering with the
Right,
plow.
so if Mike and Samantha both drove, F-150s, there's no way they would fit. But if, one of them drives a Honda Fit and one of them drives like a Corolla, that's not a problem.
I mean, and we're not.
So we're not approving, Mike and Samantha's project, we're approving the project as a viable single-family home.
Yeah,
But we're
yeah,
also,
no, I get it, yeah.
but without a parking standard for number of parking spaces, we don't really have, we can't say you have to provide 2 spaces unless they're proposing an accessory dwelling unit.
Well,
Then we would say-
the conditional use criteria is specific to say that, sorry, I have to scan back to it, but the conditional
Does-
use criteria says that it shall not adversely affect the adequacy of parking.
Got it. Okay. Yep.
So, I feel like I'm sounding like I'm really anti. I just want to make sure, it's not that I'm really anti, it's that I want to make sure everybody understands what the issue is clearly.
Okay, shall we move on to number 2? Or do we have more questions? Okay,
For my benefit, if I'm gonna be writing the draft decision, I'd like to know where board members are on this.
okay.
I have no issue with, I feel like parking would be adequate on site with this plan.
Other board members? I'm fine with it. No objection? Okay.
No objection.
Does that help you?
Thank you.
Okay. Number 2, the board requires the applicant to include the proposed structure on the provided survey with a note indicating that the building placement was provided by the architect and not the surveyor.
Yep, so we're totally fine with this, and we actually submitted a revised survey to Marla prior to the meeting.
Okay?
We just had, so between Missa and I, we were talking about, you know, whose plat should it be on, and we went Missa's, and the comment is basically it should have been the surveyors. So we just reached out to Summit Engineering and had them, you know, basically do what you asked, and we submitted that to Marla, so you guys should have that already.
Okay, all right. Now, this is a conditional use application, so we're gonna take public comment. Do you have anything else to add before we move to public comment? Frank, go ahead.
I thought the real issue here was the invasion of the side setback, no?
Yeah.
All right. What standards apply for us to allow the invasion of the side setback?
So there's 2 sets of criteria. There's the standard conditional use criteria, no adverse effect on traffic, community facilities, that sort of thing. And then there's this 13.06J, additional J3, which Delilah has up now. Additional encroachment subject to DRB approval, and there's these criteria A, B, C, and D. So the criteria are, it has no adverse impact, no undue adverse effect on views of adjoining and/or nearby properties or principal buildings located thereon. No undue adverse effect on access to sunlight of adjoining and/or nearby properties. No undue adverse effect on adequacy of on-site parking. And no undue adverse effect on safety of adjoining and/or nearby properties. So the only one that staff highlighted was the adequacy of parking, but you're certainly welcome to talk about the other 3.
I would definitely like to comment on that issue.
Go ahead.
Because your proposed structure is the same distance off the side yard setback as your existing garage. And that sort of is a thing that we seem to be focused on, that they're not making the situation any worse. But the problem is that the existing garage is set far back in your property where it looks like it's beyond the line of your neighboring house. You know, the neighbor's house, it's behind that. So you're bringing that up to be directly in line with your neighbor, who looks like they might come a little forward to that. But now you're putting looks like it's approximately a 2-story, if not 1.5, but definitely much taller than your garage, which also has a pitched roof away from the side yard. You're now going vertically 3.5 feet off of your side yard, vertically up. And I do have concerns about the adequacy of the regulation in terms of blocking of sunlight to adjacent properties with that.
But it's not even that. The Supreme Court has said that, you know, a vertical increase within the setback is an additional, is a further incursion, and I think that's obviously also the case with extending the structure to the front. So I come back to my question, what are the standards for us, not for conditional use per se, but for us to allow any relaxation of the setbacks?
So this is not a nonconformity. This, as it exists today and as it is proposed, is allowed under the LDRs with these additional standards. It's not, they're not proposing to modify or increase an existing nonconforming
They're
structure.
proposing to further invade the setback.
as allowable under 3.06
All right,
J.
one of the problems we're having here is I'm really having trouble hearing you through the mask. So,
So Delilah, could you pull back up to the bottom of page 3 again?
Maybe move this a little closer, so Frank. The masks make it difficult to hear.
So additional encroachment subject to DRB approval. If the board approves it, because it has no additional impacts, as I read out before, A, B, C, and D, then it can be closer than 5, but no less than 3 feet from the side property line.
okay, so it says subject to the provision of Article 14, so we're back to conditional uses, which is adverse effect on what?
Views of adjoining and or nearby properties, access to sunlight of adjoining and or nearby properties, adequate on-site parking, and safety of adjoining and or nearby property.
Okay, so the person with the likeliest ground of complaint, if there is a complaint, I'm not saying there is, are the people immediately adjoining you, which is, what's the address, 13 White Street, is that,
I'm 13, so that would be 15.
I can't hear.
15 White Place would be the neighbors who would have filed a complaint if there were to be one.
And they've written a letter of support.
I have a question about that standard. Does the standard say if a neighbor doesn't object, then it does, by definition, does not have an undue adverse effect? Or
Oh,
is
no,
it-
no,
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
not saying, no, I'm not saying that
No, I just want to
it's definitive.
make that clear, just,
But it's not irrelevant.
Right.
right, yeah, no, it helps, obviously, but, yeah, it's a good, it's a piece of information that we weigh, yeah.
Well, what's between you now? Is there any vegetation between you and the property next door now?
No, not really. There's raspberry bushes, so I wouldn't really call that vegetation in the form of it's blocking the view or anything like that. In the rear of the house, we do have cedars. So in the rear of in the garage now, we do have cedars that are probably 15 feet, maybe. So they sort of, the owners before us had a hot tub, so they basically planted a row of cedars behind the house to block the view of their hot tub. So there is, some vegetation in the back corner of the garage, but not parallel to the actual structure.
Questions?
Has a prior board dealt with this issue of a property on the 5-foot setback line that's going pretty vertical?
Yeah,
As opposed to just,
in during the time before First Frank or after First Frank and before Second Frank, we reviewed one on Proctor Ave that was doing a very similar thing. So 2020, 2019, is that right, Frank?
the big yellow house at the corner with Orchard?
It wasn't on a corner. It's actually
on
adjacent
Hadley.
to Hadley.
It's
I'm
on
sorry.
Hadley, but it's sort of within a stone's throw of the intersection with Orchard, yeah.
And we've also seen quite a few in Queen City Park.
Yep. And what is the standard as undue adverse? What is the track record? What is
There was
the-
actually one in Queen City Park that was appealed. That was the CATZ project, KATZ. And there was a lot of review of access to sunlight and views of adjoining properties. And I think the board's decision was to allow it, and it ultimately was upheld.
I mean, here, just being on the east side of the house, that I don't have, it doesn't create as much sort of shading issues or sunlight access issues. That the existing house is already that tall, so it's not an additional barrier to sunlight.
Okay.
I don't know if it helps, but basically along the south property line, we do have a lot of very tall trees, probably 40, 50 feet that, they have leaves on them. So it is a very shady backyard to begin with. So it's not like you have a direct, ray of sun. coming through the south property. So I don't know if that helps or not.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Yep, I just have one comment on the report provided by your architect in terms of your distance setbacks to property line and construction classifications. I would just point out that your distance separation to adjoining structure is not to your next door neighbor, but it's always to your property line. So you have to work with the 0 to 5 feet separation. And you are going to be needing a 1 hour rated construction for that entire wall because you're below 5 feet to the property line. I know that Vermont, I'm trying to remember if Vermont has adopted a formal 1 or 2 family construction code, but under IRC, your architect references IBC, International Building Code. That's for multifamily and commercial, but for 1 or 2 family, it's the chart says if you're within 0 and 3 feet, it's not permitted. 3 to 5 is 1 hour rated, so you are going to have to be a rated wall construction.
Missa, are you on it? Can you take that?
Yeah, I'm interested to hear that. I've always proceeded with the setback. So say your 15 White Place was to do an addition to the west, they would have to meet the setback requirement. So it's always been between the adjoining properties. I hear what you're saying regarding the property line. I just haven't had it interpreted quite like that. I've been around for 20 years and I haven't heard it quite like that. So
You just can't put an imposition on your neighboring property by using their distance separation from you as the basis for how you build your house. You have to use the invisible line of your property line.
right. So we're doing, it's the 3 to 5 feet because we're at 3 foot, 3.5.
Yep.
So, we are intending to do an hour rated wall. It's fiber cement construction. And then if you look at the openings, I think it's 10% openings for the window openings. So that's what we were intending to do.
I will tell you that I think if you
And
look at
that would meet the
IRC,
requirements.
if you look at IRC for the table R302.1, which talks about, it's the same equivalent of your table 602 that you've quoted, but just for single family residential, I think you're allowed up to 25% windows
Okay.
in the 1 hour rated wall.
Okay, great.
So it gives you a little more
Even
latitude,
better.
but yeah. And the 1 hour rating needs to be both interior and exterior, not just your exterior finishes.
Mark, I'm.
Yeah, the whole wall construction would be.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
It would meet the UL rated
Yep.
1 hour construction.
Mark, I'm sorry. Could you tell us what a 1 hour rated wall is, please?
Oh, it's just Underwriters Laboratory UL does testing and tells you what each construction assembly for walls, windows, doors, materials will meet. So like in the building code, it talks about 1 hour rating, 2 hour rating for fire protection.
Oh, fire
And 1 hour
protection.
means that for both the exterior and interior. So if there's a fire on the interior
Sure.
of the house, you're protected from it going to the outside
Okay, that
for up
makes
to an
sense.
hour. And if there's a fire on the outside, protected from going to the inside.
I was thinking it was heat or cold, but
Right, no,
thank-
no, no, no,
thank you.
it's fire
Okay,
protection.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, so let's, where does this leave us? Have we answered number 2? Do folks feel like we have an adequate information about that? Frank, you
Yeah, I'm all right.
and Dan, you made some comments? You okay? Okay, Mark,
Is it possible to make a comment regarding the sunlight as well?
go ahead.
Or no? And I know that the cedars were originally, I don't know if Mike wants to mention this, but they went all the way to the front of the neighboring property home previously, and those cedars, blocked more sunlight than this addition would now. So in previous years prior to this, the landscaping that existed previously would have been more adverse effect than the height of this addition. I just wanted that information to be known.
Thank you. So this is a conditional use application. Do we close this? Okay. So thank you for your testimony. We're going to ask, yep, that's what I'm doing. We're going to ask for public comment, and thank you for answering our questions. So, is anyone here in the audience, is there anyone who would like to provide public comment on this proposal? Do we have any indication of people online? No, no, okay. All right, so I would entertain a motion to close this hearing.
So
I'll make a motion that we close, I don't have the hearing in front of me, this hearing.
This hearing. Second?
yeah.
Okay, good. Any discussion, further discussion? All in favor of closing this hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So the motion's carried. Thank you again.
Perfect. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Good luck.
Okay, next. Agenda item number 7, continued preliminary plat application SD 2119, pardon me, of 600 Spear Street, LLC for a planned unit development on an existing and 8.66 acre lot developed with 7,000 square feet storage building and single-family home. The planned unit development consists of one 6.68 acre lot containing 32 dwelling units in 4 family buildings, a 1.24 acre lot containing the storage building, an existing single-family home proposed to be converted to a duplex, and a third lot containing proposed city streets at 600 Spear Street. Good evening. Let me just ask if there are any board members who need to recuse themselves or if anyone has a disclosure to make. Hearing none. Would you please introduce yourself and then we will swear you in?
I'm Lucy Thayer, a landscape architect with Trudell Consulting Engineers.
Okay, I didn't hear your first name.
Lucy.
Lucy. And I'm going to ask you to pull the mic closer to you, please. It's very hard to hear with
How's
masks.
that?
Thank you. We'll see, okay? And
Hi, I'm Abby Derry with Trudell Consulting.
Abby, I think your mic is off. If you press the button, it'll be more bright green.
okay, good, thank you. Raise your right
Also,
hands.
Frank Von Turkovich is on the phone.
Oh, okay. Hi, Frank.
Hi. Hello.
Frank and Lucy and Abby, would you raise your right hands, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Yes.
Yes.
I do.
Thank you. Please, I know we've seen you here before, but this project has changed significantly. So please give us a little overview of it and tell us what you're now proposing.
All right. Frank is online. Frank, we can't see you, so if you want to interject, please just speak out because we can't. Oh, thank you, Delilah. Now we can see you. So,
Okay, great.
all right. So, as you noted, the plan has changed.
Excuse me for just a moment. Frank, what's your role in this? Frank,
Pardon me?
what's your role in this project?
Frank, I am I'm here tonight speaking for the developer. I am a principal. And
All right, I got it. I have represented Frank in the past. I'm not doing so currently. I feel as if I can impartially decide the matter, but if anybody objects, I'll recuse myself.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, I would sort of make that same statement. It's been years, but I did work for Frank many, many years ago, but I don't feel that there's any impartiality that I can't.
Does anyone have any concerns about these disclosures? Okay, thank you. All right. Please give us a little overview of the changes you've proposed.
Okay, Dawn, as you noted, the plan does look different, but we'd like to emphasize that really all of the components of our original plan are still included in this newly revised plan.
Okay.
All of those kind of main intense goals and, critical components, those are all represented. They're just laid out slightly differently. So I think, Marla, would it be okay, or Delilah, sorry, you're running it, if we looked at perhaps maybe the rendered plan? That we sent separately.
Oh, okay. It helps when you know the packet number.
Yeah, it'll just be a second. I don't think that we were quite ready to pull up the supplemental yet, but it is there.
That will be the easiest thing to look at as we talk about what this new plan looks like. It is a two-dimensional plan view.
Oh, it's page, yeah, page 2 of the other one. Yeah, so go to,
There we go. Thank you very much. So this represents our revised plan layout. So we still have the city street that starts at 600, it starts at Spear Street and it heads to the east and then turns north-south. One difference between this plan and the last plan is that we have shifted the north-south connection further to the east. So just to back up quickly, one reason that we are even kind of in this position is because we had our preliminary hearing. There were staff notes. There was a condition. There's a regulation where only 19 units or fewer can be served by private roads. We had 20 units that were served by a private road. We looked at alternative configurations and didn't find anything that we felt was all the way there yet. So we wanted to step back, and look at how we could rearrange these components to get all of those units onto the site with the same design intents and elements and revise the layout slightly. So that's just stepping back. That's how we got to this revised plan that we're showing you today. That's a higher level. So we shifted the north-south street connection farther to the east, and by doing that, we created a double-loaded street, meaning that we have residences now on both sides of the street. We have shifted the parking to be on the north and south sides, which really creates a central development block, that centralized development area, our core development, that has the 6 residential units along the kind of exterior of our green space, and then we have our other 2 units to the west. So with this, we have created this internal green space. We had an internal green space on the last one, but it was separated by our private road network. We removed the private road network and reduced the infrastructure on the site, which we think is a net positive. With this interior green space, we have kind of more of a courtyard feel. We have recognized that we worked a lot with staff on this, and we recognized the importance of creating a front door appearance on both of these sides that are entrances. So the way that the architecture, you enter on the street side or the parking lot side typically, we just recognize that it's really important to treat all of these as equally important entrances on the interior side, on the road network, and on the parking side. Access to that interior courtyard is through either individual units that can exit out and directly into the interior courtyard green space. It can be between the buildings, or the primary entrance from the west road network leads you in to an area that's got a pergola, a planted area. It's our more formalized kind of gathering space. It's that visual connection from the street. that brings you in, and then we have a less organized, informal green space that's open. We're trying to keep this open for folks to use and recreate in a multiple different ways, whether it's kicking a ball or sitting out and reading or multiple different gatherings, but letting that be not programmed and have a lot of different ways it could be used. So one thing that we talked a lot about with staff is the differentiation between public space and private space, and this came up in our last hearing as well. One way that we're going to differentiate those spaces is through our hardscape and softscape elements. So one obvious delineation is the path that loops along around the interior green space. We're also going to utilize softscape elements, planting, potentially other landscape materials like fences or boulders that are short and open. We think it's really important to keep that visual connection to the central green space for all of the residents and all of the units. So we definitely don't want to block anything off. We don't want to have privacy fences. We want to create a strong visual connection, but maintain a clear separation of space so folks feel comfortable in their outdoor private space versus the public space. One thing that's not shown on here is our stormwater treatment that we are planning to develop further, and I'll just note where those locations are on here, and Delilah can highlight them as I go. But to the northeast of building 5, which is not noted on here, Delilah, but you're very close, head south. Right there, that green space is one of the areas we've reserved for stormwater. And if you keep going south to the other right in this area, that's another location we've identified for stormwater treatment. And then all the way to the farthest southwest building, right in that, the proposed, that one, that we have proposed stormwater treatment before, and we would propose that as a potential location again. And lastly, along our northern property boundary would be a location where we anticipate stormwater would go. One other change you're noting on this plan is that we're showing a solar development that is proposed and being reviewed by the state. Our green space path, we have a trail, as you may have noted in the staff report, there's a trail that will go around the exterior of that solar array, and that we connect to on the east side of our green space there. Let's see, what else?
Thank you for
Can I ask
that.
a question?
Sure.
To the south of the solar array, the little plots, is that like a community garden?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that is what that would be.
Other questions before we jump into the staff comments and questions?
Do you know what you're proposing yet for stormwater treatment?
What specifically we're proposing? I'll let the engineer answer that.
What we're gonna have to do a combination of surface bioretention areas and subsurface for water quantity. So in the areas that Lucy had shown on there, it would most likely be surface detention.
And would it be wet or dry?
Dry. Yeah. Any other questions?
Quick question about the gardening plots. Are those the raised boxes, or is that just sort of a general location? Has that been determined yet?
So you're right, they are raised boxes in this iteration. That is something we would develop a little bit further as we go forward. But I think raised boxes would be in this location. So this is more or less accurate, and they would be raised.
Okay. I mean, it's such a large property that, I mean, some of the raised boxes are nice because they're nice and tidy, and maybe that's all people want for a few tomatoes, but if there is an option to have, potentially something a little larger than a raised box, 10 by 20 or something like, I mean, if there's room for it, I don't know how you would manage it amongst the units, but there's.
Let me jump in with that and say that I think there is room for a more robust garden area. We just wanted to identify the space, but the actual programming will come later, and we'd be happy to devote more land for that purpose.
And is
Yeah,
this-
not, just to be clear, I don't want to micromanage it, but you got space and
Oh.
give people options and let the residents work it out, so.
And is
No,
this amenity?
we agree. That's a good idea.
Is this amenity free to the residents? Or would they have to pay extra for the gardening plots?
No, the gardening plots would be free to the
Thank
residents.
you.
Yes.
Thank you.
What, would you review again what you were saying about the solar array? Is that for the benefit of this project? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exclusively?
Pretty much, yes. It's being proposed as a 500 kW fixed ground-mounted solar project. So your typical ground-mounted array that we're all used to seeing in the area. 500 kilowatts will produce enough to serve all of the dwelling units in the project. So there's a total of 34 units, and also the uses for the steel building, and there will probably be on an average annual basis a surplus that would be available to offer to an off-taker. And this is in Green Mountain Power's grid, so there are potentially other users that might benefit from this as well, but it should allow the project to be, we believe, completely self-sustaining from an energy standpoint.
You mean from an electricity standpoint? You don't mean heat, do you?
Yes, we mean heat. So we're thinking of heat pumps for the units. So all electric, all site generated.
We also have EV charging stations included on this plan in the parking.
Nice.
Do you have any battery storage planned or just feeding off the grid?
We're looking at the possibility that battery would be a good feature of the solar component. We have to talk to our contractors. Peck Electric has done work for us before. They would be managing this project. What's interesting about the evolution of the solar itself is that these are bifacial solar panels. So they will actually pick up solar generation from the top, which is typical, and also reflect it off the ground. So in the wintertime, on a day where the snow actually sheds off the solar panels, it'll actually be really productive because it'll get a lot of reflection from the snow from the ground.
So are there any other questions, general questions, before we dive into the staff comments? Okay.
Can I ask if you have time for this, if Marla, if you're okay, that we might want to show some of the other illustrations that we have that give the board a reminder of what the buildings look like and how some of these spaces that Lucy just described fit together. Do you want to do that now or later?
I'm concerned about the time. How long do you think it'll take?
I think if you just want to give us a minute to flip through the slides that we have that show the renderings, that might be, and I'm not thinking the floor plans necessarily, but the other supplementals that we provided that you put up, but we're happy to look at the architecture as well, whatever you
If you
prefer.
can do that briefly, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay. So
Just a second
in terms
while
of
we
the
pull
building
those up.
architecture, yeah, okay, I'll wait.
These are all rental units, correct?
Yes. So this shows the back of the buildings, the slide that we just saw, and then this is looking east and west through the project from the other side of the public street. It has a lot of the same feeling that we were able to accomplish with the first design. We've kept that green space in the middle. This is actually a much bigger green space area, and it isn't intruded into by the parking and the cars that we had in our last design. So as this idea evolved, we ended up really liking this feel, and I wanted the board to see this because all of the units, the building's backyards or decks and patios will all transition into the sidewalk and then into the green space, and we think it really has it has the right feeling. It has the feeling that we were looking for, which was this type of community space.
Thank you. Are there any other visuals you'd like to share with us? No? Okay. We're good? Okay. So let's,
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Let's start looking at the staff comments. Number one, staff recommends the board discuss the overall patterns of development. I think I was parking. Staff recommends the board revisit the relationship between proposed parking areas and landscaping and adjoining properties to the north and south, particularly in light of development potential on those properties.
So this comment, Dawn, is a little awkwardly worded, but the idea here is, they're presenting the sketch level analysis, or they're presenting the sketch level plan, so staff has prepared a sketch level analysis, and this comment is to say, the board at the last hearing talked a bit about how the property related to the properties to the north and south. And so, if the board kind of blesses them to develop this to a preliminary plat level, then we're just going to go back to that conversation and, work on the fine details of the relationship to the adjoining properties.
So shall we just move on to the next comment?
Unless there's anything the board has to say about the overall pattern or wants to comment on about the relationship now.
I mean, I'll just say that, the original submission you gave, I liked, and I commented that I liked it, and I think this is a great improvement. I really like the way the buildings create sort of like a central court. I'm not saying I'm concerned, but I guess I'm reiterating sort of staff's comments, how development to the north and south, if it ever does occur, how it might sort of tie in. I see to the north, you definitely have a curb cut or, a right-of-way that goes to the property line, but to the south, I don't, oh, actually I see it. It's dotted in. But, the actual project, I really like. I like the idea that you have, the solar array, the garden plots, the central green space. It's a really good improvement. So I think it's a good project. The only thing I haven't seen in this, and maybe it's just because we are at preliminary, but I know we have discussed it and I still don't see it, is the steel building, what your ultimate plans are for it, what you're going to do, whether you're going to, skin it in a more residential feel, what are the plans for it?
So Mark, the steel building, probably the best thing to look at to describe what I'm going to tell you now is if you could go back to the rendering that has the color on the plan, it might make it a little easier to see. I guess that would probably work. If we can zoom in a little bit to the steel building, it would be helpful. So what you see now is the steel building is there. We don't want to tear it down. We actually think it's a functional and helpful part of the project. But the way it's going to relate to the project now is that by moving the north-south city street further to the east, that's allowed us to put the two buildings on that side of the street, and that effectively screens the steel building from the rest of the project. The treatment behind the two buildings that are now on that city street is something that we have to consider. This rendering doesn't show it, but on one of the site plans, we actually show a fence that would be between the steel building and the backyards of these buildings, and that would probably be the right idea. We need to talk more with staff about that. But the rest of the steel building with the landscaping and the parking areas broken into two separate areas in the front, and with some trees planted to the west of the steel building, we we know we can't hide it. So what we want to do is to make it look good and look functional and serviceable and well-maintained. And that's what we're proposing to do. We intend to reuse the building for tenant uses and for our own internal use as owners. And at this point, there are not any plans to increase the development inside the steel building, but that's something that we might come back to someday to the city if we have ideas that would be acceptable. But this is basically the feeling that we're trying to get to with this landscape.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question about the parking spaces around that. Are those the parking spaces to the south of the steel building, are those necessary to meet parking requirements for the development as a whole? Or is it just like, we're allowed to have a parking lot there, so we're gonna put it in there?
Those spaces are the ones that are on the westernmost side of that second parking lot. Those actually are intended to serve the white house that's adjoining the project
Okay.
to the west. There are two units in there. One has 4 bedrooms, so there is a need for a substantial amount of parking.
Okay.
And we'd like to try to get that parking off of Spear Street if possible. So
Okay.
that was the thought there, but we also want to leave enough parking so that the users of the steel building can have some parking, and then the ones on the eastern side of the parking lot are intended to serve the buildings that are directly in front of it
Okay.
for off-street.
As to the parking, it looks like some of those residential buildings have quite a trek to get to their parking spot. Is that right?
Well, there is not, I think maybe possibly a little more than what was required under our old plan, but I'm really sensitive to that. We own enough property now to realize how important it is to have parking that's reasonably close to where people's front doors and back doors are. With these buildings having front entrances, back entrances, they're all relatively short walks to where your car might be parked. So we looked at the proximity of parking as we developed this plan, Frank, and we really thought that these are reasonably close.
Well, I mean, I think it's a pretty attractive project, so maybe the trade-offs are worth it, but I think it's a bit of a trek. I don't know what I would do about it, however.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, number 2. Staff believes the applicant has largely achieved these in their plan, but invites the board to discuss these design elements as they are critical to the operation of the neighborhood. I think we've already addressed a lot of this, but I'm wondering if you feel like we have, Marla, and if people have anything else to add.
I would say in some respects, they are setting the character of the neighborhood.
Okay.
So,
All right, let's move on to number 3. Staff recommends the board discuss the planned landscaping in that area and confirm the mature height of the vegetation will not impede the proposed view corridor.
So we see that note, and we will address that during our plan development to ensure that that view corridor is not inhibited.
Okay, we'll look forward to seeing that. Thank you. Number 4, staff recommends the board direct the applicant to rework this parking area to meet the regulations and needs of the project.
Yeah, so that's that parking lot that we were just discussing south of the metal building. We read the notes, and we will ideally, if the board doesn't have a problem, we'd like to retain most of it, but bring it into compliance. I think it was noted that some of those parking spots need to be removed, so we'll do that. But like Frank said, we have quite a few things that we're trying to address with those parking spaces, as well as retain access to the overhead doors.
Okay, thank you. So there's parking, to Frank's point, the parking that we saw previously, there's also parking on the north side.
Yes.
So the furthest anyone would have to walk is half of the property. are there loading and unloading areas? I mean, I can imagine arriving with 5 bags, big bags of groceries or something. Are there unloading areas before people park their car?
We don't currently have any loading areas, but I know that one of the recommendations here is to add on-street parking on one side, so I think that we could accomplish some of that.
Okay, great. All right, number 5. The applicant has proposed a development pattern which supports expansion to adjacent properties. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to construct the proposed north-south roadway to the property line to facilitate future connection. That's doable? Okay. And number 6, treatment of stormwater, we've already discussed that somewhat. Do you need any more information, Marla, about that? Or do board members have any more questions about that? We good? Okay, thank you. Number 7, staff recommends the board require the applicant to modify the public roadway cross-section to include 1 lane of on-street parking with appropriate bump outs. You said you're planning to address that, so good.
Sorry, was there any other, I guess I was a little surprised not to see it. Were you just not thinking about it, or is there any reason it wasn't included?
I mean, I really think it was in the interest of limiting infrastructure. So we didn't need it, therefore we didn't propose it.
But we can modify that, the plan to show that and include it.
Okay. That brings us to the end, and now we're going to ask for public comment. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here.
So we do need to, after public comment, continue because they haven't really done a full preliminary plat. So this is more like a sketch within the preliminary plat.
All right, that's fine, thank you. Are there any members of the public here who would like to make comments on this proposal? Folks online, are there any people? Okay, good. So we will be concluding the hearing tonight, or continuing the hearing, and I would entertain a motion to do so.
So when would you guys be ready? Because I have kind of placeholdered you in for January 18th, which means I would need stuff the first week of January. Does that work for you? No, more time. Okay, when would you like to get stuff to us?
I think that we would appreciate a little bit of time. We've been waiting to hear kind of what everybody's thoughts were before really diving into the design. So,
Sure. Do you want to be in the second meeting in February?
Either the second meeting in February or the first in March.
Okay. I'm gonna have to remind
Maybe
myself of those
the
dates. Some of those are Wednesdays, just because of holidays. That's not a problem for you guys.
Nope.
Okay. Schedules, 2022 meeting schedule. So we have room for either of those dates. February 15th is a Tuesday, March 2nd is a Wednesday.
March 2nd.
Okay. So the motion would be to continue to March 2nd.
I make a motion that we continue ST 2119 to March 2nd.
Second.
Thank you, Dan. Any discussion? All in favor of continuing this hearing until March 2nd, did you say? Say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. We'll see you back here in March.
Thank you very much.
For your time. Okay. Now, I have a question about the next 2 projects that are very much related. I'm wondering if let's see, if it would make sense to do the subdivision first?
So the reason I put them in that order is because the subdivision is much simpler
Okay.
than the site plan, and if we get through the site plan, Most of the subdivision comments have already been dealt with.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that rationale. Okay, site plan application SP 21046 of Greenfield Capital LLC to construct a 2 to 3 story, 130,790 square foot light manufacturing warehouse and office project. 418 parking spaces and associated site improvements on a proposed 19.81 acre lot at 443 Community Drive. Who are here for the applicants, I guess is the question.
There's a number of us here. I'm John Illick, and I represent Technology Park, and I'm also here on behalf of Roland and Lisa Gronfeld, who will be the owners of this. They're the owners of On Logic, who will be the owner of this project. We have our architecture and engineering team here as well.
Is anyone
Yeah.
online, or is everyone here?
Yeah,
I believe David Roy, our principal architect, is online,
Okay.
and I see Roland and Jess from On Logic as well.
Okay.
That's correct. Yep.
So if you could all please raise your right hand, I'm going to swear you in. Gentleman in back, all the way back. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Do.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, John, go ahead and give
No,
us,
Don,
sorry,
I'm recused from this.
I'm
item.
sorry. Stephanie is recused. Is there anyone else who needs to recuse himself or disclose a conflict of interest?
Dawn, we can just let Stephanie go, right? We have
Yeah.
enough of a
Okay.
quorum for minutes.
Okay. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
I mean, you can stay and listen if you like, but you can't change your mind if you leave your computer up here.
Yeah.
So, John, please give us an overview of this particular project.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the geography of Technology Park, but it sits essentially just north of I-89 and south of Kimball Avenue. And for people that have a little history here, it's the site of the former Digital Equipment Plant. We purchased it in 1995 and have repurposed it into a business park. And most of you probably have been either through it or whatnot. It's sort of number one landmark would be the Whale's Tails by way of identity. Roland and Lisa are interested in buying what amounts to be the southwest corner of the park. It's currently 3 lots, which we're going to consolidate into a single lot to facilitate this construction. And it totals just under 20 acres, 19.8 acres or thereabouts. The facility is necessary to handle the fairly aggressive growth of On Logic. Most of you know they have a existing facility, not only here in South Burlington, but in North Carolina and also internationally. This facility is their headquarters, will continue to be their headquarters. They will keep their existing facility in the short term anyway, but this will be their principal new headquarters. In Reader's Digest version, the building will be composed of 3 primary functions: corporate office space, assembly. They're a light assembly company. They basically assemble for sale heavy-duty computers for difficult and challenging environments. And then, of course, warehouse, which will handle their storage and distribution function. The architecture is such that the office will be a 3-story building, as we described at our sketch plan review. The warehouse necessarily is a single-story facility, and the assembly function will be primarily 1 floor, but it has a mezzanine. We're interested in having a little bit of customer interaction between the office space and watching the assembly occur, sort of part of our sales effort. There'll be 2 curb cuts on the property, which show on the site plan. Most of you have seen that. The easternmost will handle the employee and visitor traffic, car traffic, and the westernmost will be access to the loading and unloading facility on the western side of the building. As you can see from this drawing, the tan is the building, the black obviously is the pavement. And around the perimeter of the lot, which also is around the perimeter of the larger property, Technology Park, is the current and slightly relocated pedestrian path. That's a recreational path that was essentially created by Digital Equipment for their own employees. Since we've purchased the property in '95, we've allowed the public to use it, which we actually like. People will walk their dogs, fly kites, do whatever, take their lunch break and walk out there, and we're going to continue that. People also use it periodically to get access to the whale tails because it's the sort of safest route. You can walk across the meadow, but it's safer to be on the path. Immediately to our east is the recently completed Federal Express ground facility. And we do have a drawing that shows the approximate location of that facility to this. That's the primary relative building. I say relative because they're similar in scope, both in terms of pavement and size of building. The white roof you can see in that drawing in the lower right-hand corner is the FedEx facility. There's a couple of similarities between that site plan development and this, which we'll describe as we go through, most of it having to do with number of parking spaces with the driveways and those sorts of things. That's it for a general description, unless people have other questions. We'll get in, I know there was a staff comment a little bit on architecture, and we'll get at that. The type of building materials that we'll be using on the exterior of the building as we get to that section in the staff comments.
Dawn, can I make a preliminary comment before the
Sure.
board gets into the review? So, staff met with Roland and Jess before they submitted this application, and they had every intention of submitting sort of a two-stage application. Because of the nature of this project, it results in one lot, not two lots. It's a site plan, it's not a PUD. They weren't able to do it, so what they've submitted is the application for the property. And once this hearing is closed, that's the only review this board will do. So it's not for lack of trying. They had intended to submit two separate things so that the board had sort of like a preliminary and a final review. They weren't able to because of the nature of the project. So I just want to remind the board that like this is the only review of this application. So everything has to be perfectly buttoned up before we close.
Okay, so if the board feels at the end of when we get through the staff comments that it's not buttoned up, we can continue it.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Don,
Thank you.
we hope we can answer all of your questions this evening. That may or may not end up being the case, but
Okay.
we believe we can.
Okay.
Marla was kind enough to get us the staff comments in enough time that we could respond to them
Right.
in writing. Those responses are in your hands, or I believe they're in your hands. They were to Marla, I
Right.
don't know, by noon today. And if there's any questions as we go through those by way of completeness of answer, hopefully we'll be able to do that this evening.
Okay, and I know Marla did tell us that you had submitted quite a large packet, but we haven't had a chance to review it, so.
Yeah, not to belabor that, and I apologize a little bit. We essentially resubmitted everything, even things that hadn't changed or been were answers to Marla's questions. So it might have been a little bit cumbersome to receive that amount of information. But as you go through the staff notes on what we submitted at noon today, we've addressed just the comments that Marla has
Okay,
made.
great. So hopefully we can fly through this.
Hopefully we can fly through it.
Okay, all right, thanks. The first question, or the first comment relates to approval from the appropriate airport regulatory bodies.
Yes, yeah. So you can see from our response here, and I hope you have those in front of you, we don't violate any
I
criteria.
don't think we got a written
Okay.
response. We just got some plans. Kristen's shaking her head no.
No, okay, so I have them here.
Please tell us your response.
Yeah, so we've made this application umpteen times before, basically for every development we do at Technology Park. And people in the surrounding area have to do it as well if you're in the airport approach zone. We don't violate anything, so we're going through the protocol now. Our application has been submitted October 8th. They have a minimum review period of 45 days. We actually had contact with them a day or two ago. We expect we'll probably have final approval within 30 days.
Okay. So you have no concerns?
No,
No, okay, good.
no. In
Thanks.
fact, we also have to get that same approval just to put a crane on the site, just
Oh,
because of the heights
wow.
of those things. So
Well, that makes
it's
sense, yeah.
not an issue, and we're very comfortable.
Okay, thank you. Number two involves the integration of architectural elements and aesthetics. What do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, we're gonna have one heck of a handsome building, is what I'm gonna tell you. There was some question about exterior building materials. The exterior materials of this building are right here. So, the principal piece of architecture, of course, is the office piece. And that will be predominantly unit masonry, which other buildings in our area have. There'll be two principal colors.
You come with samples. I like it.
Samples. It makes it a little easier. Be two principal colors of brick. That's the dominant one. It'll be floors 2 and 3 of the office. The base, pay no attention to the grout color, please. The base will be a lighter color, so that'll establish a base of the building. The upper will be this darker color. There will be a little bit of metal panel. For those of you who are familiar with metal panel, probably the most sophisticated is a product called a Luca Bond, which for people in the design field would know well. It's a very smooth and sophisticated panel. There'll be a little bit of that. And then the predominant panel be these colors here, consistent with this. The warehouse will be also an insulated metal panel. Will not be a Luca Bond, it'll be this panel here in that very color. Concealed fastener, it's a pretty sophisticated panel. And then obviously the last product of consequence is window, and that'll be typical aluminum frame and glass.
Can we, Delilah, show the big elevation? It's sort of like a very long, skinny plan, because it sort of illustrates the proportions of these different materials. I think it's just the next sheet, actually.
Yeah, we actually have a little spreadsheet that I don't know if we've submitted yet. We have. This gives you the percent of each of these products as a fraction of the perimeter of the building.
Including the warehouse?
Yes, yep, yep.
Do you have
Yeah.
a rendering of the warehouse appearance?
Should be, yeah.
So, yeah. There is a rendering too, yeah. Let me tell you what page it is, Delilah, because I can skim, since I'm not presenting, a little faster.
John, where's the lighter colored brick?
The lighter colored brick will essentially be the base of the office.
Okay.
So if we,
Right now, it's, oh, I see.
the
Okay.
first floor.
Once I zoom in, I see
Yeah,
the differentiation in
yeah,
color. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, the lower level differentiates it a little bit.
I was zoomed
differently.
too far out on the PDF. Okay. And then the sort of beige, orangish tone, that's going to be the Alucobond panels?
David?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. And then what about the light gray? Is that going to be like a light gray silver Alucobond panel between the windows?
It's almost like an orange color.
Right, but then what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the front elevation, and I see the orangish, amber, burnt, whatever color, and I see the dark brick, I see the light brick, but then I see like a silvery tone similar to the Alucobond tone. Is that a different color aluminum panel?
It is. There are two different colors of Alucobond that we're planning to use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark, do you have any comments?
No, I think that I'm in agreement. I think it is going to be an attractive building. It's going to be very nice.
The somewhat more orange color of the
It definitely
Alucobond.
fits in with the rest of the tech park, the
Okay.
development pattern in there. I mean, it's the intent of the the park, and I think it's there. I mean, obviously, we have to go through the details of it, but I think it's going to be a nice campus development for this
Thank you.
this area.
I think it's important to note that the existing buildings in Technology Park, except the FedEx building, are developer-owned, and obviously its purpose is to rent to tenants or multiple tenants. So you're not particularly, from an architectural standpoint, trying to create a tenant-specific identity. This is a single tenant, single occupant building owned and operated by a business. So the architecture needs to be specific to that tenant and represent their culture, brand, and image. And that's what we've tried to do here, and I think we've done it well.
I'm also glad to hear that they're not currently planning on vacating the existing facility in Meadowland.
Yeah.
That's a great building, and
It's a great building, and the great news here is OnLogic has been not only a wonderful employer, but a rapidly growing one and a great corporate citizen in South Burlington.
no, I'm glad
They have
to
a
hear
great
they're-
function room that they're
Yeah.
very generous with.
Yeah,
Glad to hear they're expanding and staying in South Burlington.
thank you.
Okay, so let's move.
Can I make a comment on this one?
Sure, Dan.
This issue of relationship of proposed structures to the site, I think the project complies with it for the reasons discussed. And I don't know if this has been typical of staff comments, and Marla, it appears many of your comments in 2 are really more related to the next page, 5C, where it gets a little bit more into these design elements and character of the neighborhood and all that. So do you agree with my comment that your comments under 2 are really more appropriate under 4? And they're good comments, and I want to be sure
Yeah,
we
it's
address
always
them.
tough to do these because they're related criteria, but not contiguous criteria. So I end up
Yeah.
having to like,
No, and I've dealt with these criteria before when I pitch it for the town, for the city. So I just want to be sure we talk about it, because
yeah, so
these-
now would be an appropriate time to discuss comments 4 and 5, and then we'll just go back to 3, because 4 and 5 are really integrated into comment 2. They're just unfortunately not contiguous.
Okay, I'll happy to kick that off then. Because this is always a tough one here about, because there are other brick buildings in the vicinity or use of brick, what does that mean, and what sets the character of a neighborhood? Once you have, is it the first building, the second? Especially when I just was playing around in Google Maps and I look at this neighborhood zoning district. And to me, there is no standard. We're not talking about 15 beautiful row homes, all built from 1880 to 1885, and somebody came in with a metal building on an empty lot. So in many ways, this neighborhood is under construction, it's under involvement. It's mostly empty land, looking at it from the big picture. So I just want to reemphasize that. So it does, we want something that looks nice. That's somewhat of a subjective term, but over time, if there's any infill 20 years from now, then those people are going to have to conform with this nice building. So, but when I look at the visuals of it, how it lays out, some of the color elements, it may not be brick, but it blends in because of the orange and the steel. So it seems to fit. And to some extent, it's open. The creative palette is wide open at this early stage of development of this whole quadrant. So
Well,
that's my thoughts on it.
I mean, this drifts a little bit into the philosophical, I suppose, but these are, to some extent, unique buildings serving specific purposes. And the buildings themselves are large-scale and almost self-contained environments, and I think our concern about somehow getting visual compatibility between these large, self-sufficient, function-oriented buildings should be de-emphasized. I mean, it should be minimal, both now and going forward. I don't see why, well, the going forward is a philosophical part, but certainly now, I don't see a problem with what they're doing on that scale.
I think it's important to note that compatibility which we certainly endorse, does not mean sameness. When we bought the property, the existing building, Digital, was a pretty austere, although brick unit masonry building, pretty austere building. The buildings we built subsequent to that were clearly a step above that. And I think, so you could even argue that that wasn't consistent with the existing neighborhood. So, we don't want to follow that pattern. I'm as confident as I can possibly be that we will all feel this new building is not only compatible in the neighborhood, but is a brilliant example of great architecture.
Okay, thank you. So number 4, modifies the materials and provides the required parking lot screening as recommended above, that the board finds this criterion met. What am I missing here? Proposed materials that complement or of the same caliber, we've done that. Staff considers the overall massing and form of the building to be complementary, however, and recommends if the applicant modifies the materials and provides the required parking lot screening as recommended, the board find this criterion met. So-
Right, so we skipped 3 just because we were trying to keep similar comments together. So we can go back to 3, which is about the parking lot.
Okay. This is screening, this is about screening and parking from the
Hang on,
interstate.
But on the architectural element, though, I mean, when I'm reading the staff comment, Marla, it sounds like you're challenged by the materials, because you're saying if they modify the materials.
Right, so in 2, we talked about the materials, and the board said we're satisfied with the materials, so.
Okay, no, I wanted to be sure you had a chance to speak your mind about the materials.
No, we're good. If the board's good, we're good. I mean, I think what John presented is a lot more information than was in the application. So what I would intend to do is kind of write his verbal testimony into the decision.
Okay, good.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Great.
So let's go back to 3 and talk about screening from the interstate.
Mm-hmm. Can we put up the rendered site plan that shows the landscaping? A little easier to see that. No, it would be the 2-dimensional plan view. Might just be the landscape plan.
So if you have a packet page number,
Context plan, maybe?
page number?
16.
No,
It's kind of large scale, but I don't know if that one would.
no. I mean, there's gonna be a landscaping plan in here eventually. Oh, 29, sheet 29. Yeah, so this is why we ask you to come
Yeah,
with
that-
page
that-
numbers.
That can do. I mean, that allows us to review this. So what doesn't show on this particular drawing, but shows on the larger context drawing, is the parking lot on the east side of this, which is the major parking lot, is immediately adjacent to FedEx's parking lot. So you're screening parking from parking in a way that's no different than the aisle between the parking lots.
This comment isn't about the large eastern parking lot, because that's screened from the interstate with a berm and screened from FedEx. Like you said, it's adjacent to a parking lot. This comment is specifically to the long strip of parking along the southern property line.
Yep.
And the required screening between parking lots and the interstate.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm coming around.
Okay,
that.
sorry, John, go
So
ahead.
starting on the east side, working my way around.
Okay.
On the southeast corner is a berm, which we look at the line of sight drawings from the interstate, does a very nice job breaking up that line of sight. As you move west, those next two amoebic-shaped critters are not berms, they're actually depressions, part of the stormwater management system. So they alone don't provide screening. And Mike Willard and his team have created a revised landscaping plan, Marla, from your comments, that adds, because we were also apparently short of trees. So we added trees to the southern edge of that long east-west parking lot. Both to get the tree count to the appropriate level and to create additional screening.
Would that be helpful if I pulled it up? I didn't download it for Delilah, but sounds like we may be able to, it might be, it sounds like you sent me a new landscaping plan today on that one. Okay, so let me,
Yeah, you have a new landscaping plan that
Yeah.
reflects those changes we've made.
all right. So Supplemental site plan, if I look at just the overall landscaping, landscape plan rendering. Okay, let me present. Oh, I guess I'm not an organizer, Delilah. Can you make me presenter? No, that's fine, I didn't log in, so it's my fault. Thanks. Let me find, okay, so this is just my web browser. Sorry, it's a little not pretty, but, so this is the revised landscaping rendering that they sent over.
You can see the difference between this plan and the last one we looked at, the southern edge, just north of the two detention basins, have a line of trees now. We also added a line of trees, and in fact, this is a good one because it shows the FedEx parking lot too. We also added a line of trees on the eastern edge of our parking lot, which is, except for tree quantity, is a little goofy because you're only, shielding parking from parking, but nonetheless, it's there.
Have we confirmed the landscape island requirement, landscaping within the parking, the 10%?
That's one of the staff comments.
Okay.
So I'm sure they
We'll
have
get
a
to
response to
that.
that.
Yeah. Okay, are we ready to move on
I'm gonna stop sharing, is that okay?
from 3? Okay. Let's go to 5. The applicant is proposing 4 loading docks. Can you talk to us, please, John, about clarifying the operation and screening of the proposed loading docks?
Yeah, our loading docks will be vastly less visible than the FedEx ones, which I think most people would feel are sort of pretty nondescript. They're not by any means offensive. You will see these loading docks, but marginally so. From Community Drive, the visibility of them is incredibly modest. From the interstate, there might be about a 15 to 20 second window at 55 or 60 mile an hour that you would have any shot of seeing them. You can only screen them just so far. In other words, the north and south edges are screened, but the trucks have to come in the driveway, so they can't be invisible. I'm very comfortable making the representation that they will be less visible than the FedEx loading docks or even the 30 Community Drive loading docks.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I
Any
ask a
questions?
question?
Community.
Can I ask
That's the former digital equipment building, which has 6 loading docks on east and west face.
My question might be better answered by the engineer. So on page 18 of the packet, Delilah, it looks like there's some retaining walls maybe, and they're just not labeled. And I don't know if you've revised the plans, Jeff, to show like the height of those walls, or if I should be looking at the grading plan maybe. But what am I really looking at there? If you could zoom in to like that.
Hi, I'm Jeff Zwerber. I'm an engineer with VHB. So there's the north part is 4-foot truck loading docks. The middle part is 2-foot, like smaller truck loading docks, and the south end is at grade. So there's small walls that were needed because it's immediately adjacent to transition the grade from the 4-foot to the 2-foot to at grade. And then along the north edge there, we're going to there won't be a retaining wall along the north edge there. We'll just use a sloping, vegetated surface to transition up to the area around it from 4 foot below to the building finished floor elevation.
Okay, I see that on sheet 20 of the packet, the grading plan, that there's, yep, I can see the topography now. Thank you, Jeff. So that's a tough plan to read. Wow, that's a doozy.
Okay.
The west elevation makes it pretty clear of the building
okay.
elevations. It sort of shows the loading bays, all the different at the same elevation, and then, yeah, zoom into the bottom left.
Yeah, that's a good way to represent it.
Thanks.
Just in passing, I don't know what aesthetic principle requires any level of concealment of loading docks in a commercial area. I kind of like them myself.
That can go either way. I appreciate that comment for sure. This is a IC district. Almost by its definition, you have to ship and receive materials. That's what manufacturers do. And what you try to do is just make sure they're as attractive and safe as possible.
Sure. Okay, let's move on to number 6. And this is about an access easement. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about this.
Yeah, 100% fine. It will not only mirror but be identical to the access easement we granted on the FedEx property to this property, and we'll do one in reverse.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Questions from the board? Any? No? Okay, number 7, waste disposal locations. No detail has been provided about enclosing them.
Yeah. If we could go back to that same rendered landscape site plan, it would be useful.
The one that I had.
Yeah, the one that
Okay.
you had up a minute ago that showed the new landscaping plan.
I didn't stay for something? That's really weird. I guess you do. Maybe I can log in and you won't have to do this anymore. I will try.
So while we're looking for that, our trash disposal is in self-contained units. It's not your typical dumpster with a lid you flip up and throw your garbage in. So if you look at that drawing there, on the east face of the building, on the west face of the building, about in the middle, if you could put a cursor on what looks like 3 rectilinear, right there, those are our trash containers, and they're completely enclosed. They can't be screened any more than they are. I mean, you can't put a fence around them because they're in our loading dock. But they would look very similar to a box trailer that just sit there, and they get loaded from inside, and they're completely self-contained, enclosed.
And they can be emptied, obviously.
Yeah, a truck comes, picks them, unloads them, and puts them back.
Okay, thank you. Are we good with that, board?
What do you mean, there's no lid that flips up?
No.
How do they get loaded?
They essentially get loaded from an end.
On a conveyor belt or something
A
like that?
compactor. So the trash is placed at the
Yeah,
end,
there's
it just keeps pushing it in with a compactor.
Exactly.
But that's not
Yep.
adjacent to the building. Like the ones I'm familiar with are at the U-Mall, and they actually touch the building, and so you load them from the building. How do
Looks
these
like
work?
they bring it out onto a loading dock that's elevated, and they dump
There,
it in.
there's a raised platform. As you come out the building, it's at the same level as the finished floor of the existing building. The dumpsters are just slightly lower than that by 2 feet. So you can easily dump stuff into the compactor piece of the trash enclosure. And then that's compacted into this unit. And these are 20, 30, or 40-yard dumpsters we're talking about. It's not a typical lid that you flip.
Once again, it would look like a box trailer, which has its opening on the end. It would look very similar to that, except it's a little more rounded than that, frankly. Box trailer is pretty squarish.
So I guess my comment would be that the staff comment, I guess if the board feels like this is the right thing, okay, let me see if I can do that. New share? Oh dear. Hang on, I can do this. If the board feels that what they're describing seems to make sense, I would just say that there should be a condition that says, provide the detail and prove it.
Okay.
That's the detail right there. That would be an elevation view of the end of the units looking east. So you see the building beyond.
So, I mean, it is accessible from the outside. It has a door that could come open. Is that right on the end?
David,
On the end towards facing the building, yes.
So are we looking at it from the building?
you're looking at
Towards
the
the
building.
building.
there,
Okay.
You're looking
Yep.
east.
yeah. It would, let me see if I can describe it this way. If you looked at a truck trailer backed up to a loading dock, it would look just like that.
It's a big compactor.
Without the tractor, it would look like the box, landing gears down,
Marla?
backed up to a building.
Can you see that?
So let me jump in here.
Go ahead, Dan, yeah.
So when I read the standard, it seems to say that the purpose of screening is to ensure the trash and debris do not escape the enclosure. But
Right, so there's two standards. There's the one about trash not escaping, and then there's also a separate standard in the landscaping section about screening for visual purposes. So
right, okay, so I'll speak to the landscaping one, because from the standpoint of escaping, trash and debris getting out of the enclosure, that standard is met. I mean, this is an efficient way to move trash and high volumes of trash and without having to worry about things blowing away. And it compacts it, it makes it easy to pick it up and unload and take it away somewhere. No matter how you slice it, it's still a trash enclosure, and it's permanent, like a big dumpster, although it's more attractive than a green box. Now it's a green hexagonal thingy. It needs, I mean, I would say it needs some form of screening. I understand, and it's hard because you want people to be able to move the trucks in and take it away, but at least from a landscaping standard, it would need something. At least that's what I'm seeing, so.
Yeah, the overall, they're interior and part and parcel of our overall loading and unloading facility. And that, in the larger sense, is screened from both the north and the south, which is where the streets are, by a row of landscaping. We can't do anything different than that.
Well, here's a question though.
Yep.
Then typically when we say you have to screen the landscape areas, normally we look at like, your dumpsters with the chain link or the slats, and then you throw a row of, shrubs around it, or you just say the slats are sufficient. This is obviously on a whole different scale than, your little 6x10 or
Right.
10x20 enclosure. Can we look at screening that area, that whatever size that, paved area is, that includes the loading bays, the trash compactors, can we look at screening it from all three sides that are open?
Yeah, if we look, go back to the drawing you just had, if you would, please.
Because clearly I'm agreeing that it's not feasible to screen that specific
Right.
area, because it's within an operable.
So if we zoom in a little bit on that lower left-hand corner, yeah,
Right.
you'll see a row of evergreen, and Michael, help me out here, are they arborvitae or some such? Right, along the north edge, which
Yep.
screens it as well as possible from Community Drive. If we go to the opposite side, the south edge, we have the same thing.
Okay, but
Come-
what
come
about
down.
Sorry, went the wrong way.
What about the path side, whatever side that is, I'm oriented.
So that west side of the path, we wanted the landscape character to sort of feel contiguous. So what we did is we introduced a mix of evergreen trees and deciduous trees to sort of create visual mitigation along that edge.
Right.
Okay.
So if you're on that path, looking directly east to the building, there's landscaping there.
Yep.
I honestly don't know what else we can do to make that disappear. It can't
No, I get-
disappear.
I
It's
get
a
it.
fundamental function
Is-
of our facility.
Can I ask a question? Is that, from an operations and security standpoint, obviously, the city and the public and the board and all the members who enjoy the park greatly enjoy the path that has been continuous and is planned to be continuous. But is it going to be separated? Are you going to have a fence to separate that loading bay, trash compactor area from the publicly accessed path, or is it just gonna be
No,
landscaping?
that path wants to look as natural as possible.
Okay.
It should be noted that that path is voluntarily provided.
I know
It's
that.
not-
That's what I was
there's
just
no
saying.
requirement.
Right.
We love having the public use it.
Yeah, it's a
Uh,
great path. No,
And,
it's great.
right, and they love using it. I don't want to put fences along it and whatnot. I just don't want to do that. I want it to look as natural as possible.
Yep.
I'm wondering if even just from a separation standpoint, not a security standpoint, but if we were to do more of a natural, like, split rail fence, just to say as people are walking by that, you know, visually and to separate them from that loading bay area.
I can't say I would be opposed to a split rail fence
I'm-
for, 80 feet or something, but.
Right, I'm not talking about doing the whole thing or
Yeah.
chain link, but I am saying is that, having a public path that's open to the public, walking right by an operable loading bay, high volume area might not be.
We went back there, as Michael just described, there's a line of landscaping there that I think accomplishes that purpose.
Okay. Well, I'd like to put a pin in it to sort of possibly revisit it. I don't think putting a split rail fence is a make or break on this one way or another, but
Yeah, I would take a more, I suppose, radical view. I think the requirement for screening of trash areas doesn't, as it exists in our regulations, doesn't contemplate this particular technology.
Yeah.
And that nothing about this requires any particular screening. It's just another commercial piece of equipment that is self-contained, not dangerous to any apparent degree, and not spectacularly ugly.
Yeah, thank you.
And no dogs are crawling under the fence and kicking garbage out, underneath the so-called aesthetic screening,
It's an operational feature of what
At
they're doing.
any hour of the day, 24 hours a day, 365, our neighbor, FedEx, has probably in the order of, I don't know what it is, probably 60 box trailers there that will be way more visible than this, and I don't think it offends anybody.
All right, are we ready to move on beyond the dumpster screening issue, or do we need to?
I think we can move on, but I do want to say that I think that the area itself has been screened with the proposed landscaping and the natural separation of it from the rest of the site.
Okay.
I would disagree with Frank that it doesn't need to be landscaped, but I think that it has achieved that.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
Okay.
Let's just do a time check. It is 9:30 now. We typically close at 10, close our hearings at 10. So.
I'll speak quickly.
And for what it's worth, Dawn, because we anticipated that they'd be pretty close on most issues, we did reserve time on the January 4th agenda for these
Okay.
folks to wrap up and.
Okay, so I don't have to feel guilty.
Please don't.
Okay. So we just did 7. Okay, number 8. Pavers and stone wall seating. Tell us about that.
Yeah, let's go back to that rendered site plan if we can, that rendered landscape plan.
Is that the one that you have?
Put it download it and put it in the folder so we don't have to keep flipping back and forth.
Highlight it helps to get these in
We
more in
actually
advance.
love this comment because it's one of our favorite features of the whole site.
I didn't know, they sent me so much that I didn't know really which was the thing that I needed to focus on.
And the question, I guess, is part of the landscaping budget and requirement.
Yeah, Marla, help me out here. I think the intent here is some hardscapes should not be counted toward landscape like a sidewalk. Some hardscapes can if they're like patios or gathering spaces or whatnot. So I just want to review on that rendered landscape plan, the hardscape that we're contemplating here.
Oh, you know what, I'm on the one probably on my.
Sorry, John, I recognize that you just asked me a question, and it was about what could be counted towards landscaping. Yeah, so I didn't excerpt the full LDR on this because the board's seen it 900 times. But the board can allow elements other than trees and shrubs when the objectives of the landscaping section are met. So in the staff comment, we kind of broke down, they're providing, they have a minimum value of $407,000 in landscaping. They're proposing some 165 or so, 170,000 in trees and shrubs and grasses, and then they have some 230,000 in hardscaping, which includes pavers and stone seat walls. So the question here was, where are those pavers and stone seat walls?
Right, so if we can zoom in on the southeast corner of the building / site, on that plan you just had up.
Okay.
Excellent. Southeast corner of the building, Delilah, if you could zoom in on that just a bit, you'll see what looks like gray. That is a patio. Actually, it's going to be a beautiful patio. It's quite heavily landscaped around it, and it will also have seating, stone wall seating around the east and south line of that. That's the only hardscape we're referring to, none of the sidewalks, obviously.
I have a question. This came up at a previous hearing. Is that a smoking area?
Ha! I don't know the answer to that.
I can see our client's, I can see our client's face,
Somehow
and
I don't
that's an
imagine it,
adamant
but
no.
we'll find out in a second.
I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
I can see our client's face, and that was an adamant no. It's not a smoking area.
Okay, good. Good.
This is Burlington Develop. Yeah, no, it's an absolute no. We don't allow smoking on our property whatsoever.
Perfect. Good. Thank you.
So just to clarify, this is a patio for a cafe, style space, lunch area. That's interior to the building.
What Roland just said is immediately interior to that patio space is our cafeteria.
Nice.
That's, employees obviously, and probably more likely in the good weather, will be able to use that space.
Nice. Any comments or questions?
Yeah, the only comment I have is, and I'm just not sure of the answer right now on that, is that, I know that we definitely do allow hardscapes to be included in the landscaping budget, but it typically is, as I think Marla alluded to, if the rest of the landscaping is met. And I'm not saying yes or no, I'm not weighing in or offering my opinion on that yet, but I am a little concerned that over half of the landscape budget is consolidated to this one small little corner of the building, when you do have a 22-acre site. And I know that when you have $40 million construction costs, your landscape budget gets pretty high, but you also have a large site. And I just want to make sure that we aren't reserving too much of your landscape budget for something that's going to be used 8 months out of the year, 6 to 7 months out of the year, since when it's servicing the cafeteria, area during the winter months, people aren't going to go out and enjoy that nice patio.
So-
As we look at the landscape plan, I'm not, other than our future build-out, and we have reviewed that plan during sketch plan, I don't know what else we could actually do.
So comments 10, I guess we're on 8. So comments 9 through 15 are about little tweaks to the landscaping plan. And it sounds like, from what you've been saying so far, that you have made an effort to address all of those things.
Yes, we've addressed them all,
Yeah.
and they were all good comments. Most of them had to do with, meeting a requirement for a number of trees, shade trees and
Yeah.
so forth, and that's all been amended and met.
And so to kind of conclude my point, those are the other standards of landscaping. And so if comments 9 through 15 are met, then they should be in the board's previous behavior, they should be free to apply the remainder as hardscape.
And that was my point as well. I think, that as long as they have adequately landscaped the parcel, then fine, then throw a nice, chunk of money at a very nice element.
Right.
My only concern was that it was all consolidated in one little area that's not year-round use or, I guess, aesthetic for the whole site.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Yeah.
There is a lot of landscaping on the
Yep.
site, yeah.
Don't
Okay.
disagree with you on that.
If I could just add, so you guys know, when we added all this additional landscape to the we did give you guys an updated budget. So that'll, proportionally make the landscape
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Well, I don't know if you call it landscaping, is all the green area actually green space in the final?
Until we put on an addition, it is, yes. Until we harrowed the field to do our archaeology study, that was essentially all lawn. And it will be restored to essentially all lawn, waiting for our next edition whenever that may occur, if and when that may occur.
Okay, so you're reserving the development potential of that land?
Oh,
so to
sure.
speak.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
other plans in this packet which show the future build out.
Our current model for growth has us adding on to this facility in the not terribly distant future. You know, we're targeting somewhere in the 7 to 10 year time frame. You know, whether that happens, I suppose the world has to keep rotating, but
Okay.
that's what it's being reserved for. Yeah.
I understand.
Interesting, okay. All right, so number 9, update, I think you're gonna do that. Number 10, require the applicant to address the comments prior to closing the hearing. Sounds like you're gonna do that too.
Yeah, we've done that. Michael Willard has adjusted not only the quantity of landscaping, but he also removed some of the maples that the arborist said, you know, maybe you want to think about removing. So
Right.
we did that.
Okay. 11, it's the screening along the eastern side of the parking lot.
Yes, and we did that.
You did that,
Yep.
okay. Number 12, has not provided computations. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to meet this criterion and to demonstrate it is met with an exhibit prior to closing the hearing.
That's our exhibit, and by our calculation, we believe we have met that.
Okay.
You
Well,
have a,
typically, don't they provide some sort of like diagram?
yeah, I was gonna say, do you have a number?
Michael / Jeff?
Well, for the south and the west, that's a single lane. So there does not need to be an interior island.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you. Could you move a little closer? You get a little muffled with the,
So the requirement, so Jeff just said it's a single lane. The requirement, which is on page 7 of the packet, is in all parking areas containing 28 or more contiguous parking spaces and/or in parking lots with more than a single circulation lane. So I would say this is, or, it certainly contains more than 28 parking spaces. At least 10% of the interior of the parking lot shall be landscaped with islands planted with trees, shrubs, and other plants. So I don't know, Delilah, could you pull up page 7? The black text just above comment number 12. I think that this absolutely applies to the southern parking area
Yeah.
that you were just showing.
I think it depends on how you define in the parking area. If you look at the east parking lot, there's multiple.
So I just wanted to give the board an opportunity to digest the text here.
Yeah. So if we look at.
I mean, yeah, because I mean, the east parking lot, all of those strips and little bulbs count towards their 10%, right? We just need to see a calculation showing that.
Right, so that's the east.
I think the difference is Marla, I think, is suggesting that on that southern strip, which is a single drive aisle with double loaded parking.
Yep.
The trees are outboard of the asphalt. And she's not counting that as landscape area within that.
Nope.
What I'm suggesting is it's identical to the north-south parking strips on the east, which have islands. Those trees are outboard of a double loaded corridor. And yet that does count toward 10% interior. And it's the exact same thing. The only other way you could do it is to remove some parking slots and have these little tongues that come in, which of course are a snowplow nightmare. You're much better off having that strip. Those tongues serve no useful purpose. So I fail to see the difference between our east-west parking with trees on both sides of the outside and the north-south strips in the east parking lot. There's just simply no difference.
The point of the 10% is to break up the asphalt. It's not to have green space in proximity to the asphalt. It's to break up the contiguous spaces. So like the north-south or the east, the parking lot on the east, the parking is broken up by those vertical strips. The north or the east-west one on the south side of the parking lot
The
has no
east-
break.
Well, it's a north-south one just flipped on its side, and there's only one of them as opposed to four.
We can agree to disagree. There's a way that, I know that Marla and Delilah have routinely calculated this 10%, and they look at it, and there's a way to go through the formula. And I think they're just saying, show them the typical way that they do those calculations. And I can safely say that in my 15 years on the board, I've never seen a single loaded, including that outboard strip of green, which is a natural occurrence.
Well, yeah, natural if you plant trees, which we're doing.
We could add the finger along the south, the
yeah.
single island along the south. We could add fingers into it, but it would prevent, efficient plowing.
I understand it's a pain in the ass, but that's.
It wouldn't be an island. Like the regulations, it says that you need to add an island. So I guess that's how I was looking at it. I guess I
Yeah.
understand the board looks at it different.
It looks like the solution that will solve this would be in that east-west strip of parking, probably in the middle. We'll create enough of a finger on the north and south edge of that to hit that 10%.
And you know what? That might be a nice way to provide some sort of connection over to the path or something. You can make it a landscape element that improves the overall site aesthetics. If you have to make it a little wider, you can.
Consider it done.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are you good? Okay. I'm number
13.
Pardon? 13, okay, all right. Thank you. This is about curbing and snow storage.
So we created a drawing in the last probably 24 hours that shows our anticipated snow storage and curbing areas. I believe our curbing drawing will fully meet the requirement. Snow storage is always a little bit of a vague science, so the blue there or the purple represents where we think snow will be shoved. And that is largely driven by the quantity of snow that's falling at any one time. If you get 2 inches of snow, you're probably gonna just blade that off and it'll just go off the edge wherever you're pushing it. If you get 6 inches in north, you're probably using a front end loader at least to move snow that you've plowed to the end of strips, and you'll have to load it and take it to wherever. Sometimes it's even off site, but certainly snow storage becomes an issue when you have a heavy snowfall.
Right.
Lighter ones are easier to accommodate.
Will you still be able to use the long strip with the purple with the new landscape trees adjacent to the?
Yeah, so, yes.
Right where it says LA 1.30, a front end loader could stack a substantial amount of snow there, and I do not believe that's tucked behind the berm in between the parking.
So our arborist recommends 10 feet between the edge of pavement and the tree if you're going to put snow storage at the base of trees, just as you think about that. That's the guideline we live by.
Yeah, I'm guessing the trunk of those is all of 10 feet off edge of asphalt, just based on how they're drawn there. A parking slip is 18 feet, that's probably 10 feet off. So we'll make sure that that's the case.
Okay.
All right, numbers 14 and 15 address shade trees and screening.
Yeah, so those quantities have been accommodated, and the screening have been accommodated on this new plan.
Okay, good, so we're good with that, thank you. 16, screening of utility cabinets, transformers has not been provided. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to modify the plans to provide screening of utility cabinets and transformers prior to closing the hearing.
Yeah, fair enough, and the new landscape plan does in fact show that screening.
Good, thank you. Number 17 deals with the driveway width and the driveway entrance radius.
Yeah, so our driveway width, which we're showing at 24 feet, is important to us for our sense of safety and convenience. We could not find any prohibition against that 24-foot width. So that's our proposal. We feel it'll be handsome, it'll be safe, and it'll be convenient.
Staff's arguments against 24 feet width are in the staff comments.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Staff's arguments for 20 feet instead of 24 are represented in the staff report. So if you wanted me to read that out loud, I absolutely can, or you're welcome to read it yourself. I think staff still feels, John has just said we'd like it, therefore we would like for you to approve it. I haven't heard anything that contradicts what staff's recommendation is.
Figure 15-1C of the street details, streets and concrete curbs, it shows that a commercial drive has a width of 36 feet and tapering out to a 45-foot width at the street. And so I think what we're trying to do is have an adequately wide drive to get trucks and vehicles in and out of there with adequate turning radius.
So if you're talking about commercial drives, that should just be the west. Why would the east need to be a commercial drive? You have a full turning around area for the commercial.
I guess is this commercial instead of residential? Like I guess I took commercial as in this is commercial, not residential.
So while I accept that our LDR has this outdated figure in it, realistically, we don't really use those figures for anything other than the cross-section of the pavement. We're really not in the habit of paving 36 feet for driveways for passenger vehicles.
Right.
And then, 12-foot drive lanes, that's what you see on the interstate. I don't know that this driveway needs to have interstate width drive lanes when, residential streets in South Burlington are 20 feet wide.
Mm-hmm. Other board members or board members?
Well, unfortunately, I'm having trouble hearing through the mask and
Right.
everything else, but if I could step back a minute, unless there's an explicit LDR prohibition, I would leave the width of the commercial driveway to the commercial operator.
We were unable to find any definitive prohibition to 24 feet. In fact, the driveway at FedEx is 24 feet.
Now, is the driveway at FedEx 24 feet that's supporting the truck traffic, or is it just for the employee parking?
It actually is for both.
It's for both. So you have one entrance, which is just for the employee parking, and it's pretty much just standard vehicular traffic. And then you have an entrance that's for the loading bay and more the commercial truck traffic.
Yep. They're both shown at 24 feet.
Okay, but now I guess what I would ask is, as Marla pointed out, 12 feet driving lanes is interstate, width. 20 feet is pretty standard, and I don't know why you would want 4 more feet of asphalt, and it's a pretty large length of run for that amount when it really isn't needed, for just standard vehicular traffic, two-way traffic.
That's our proposal, and we couldn't find anything that doesn't allow it.
Okay.
And I was asking that question. I mean, the reference is to the LDRs, but it would be helpful to know where, because if it's there, then we should enforce it.
Right.
And if it's not, then we shouldn't.
We definitely don't want to spend, more money on pavement than we need to. However, we don't want to under-design the facility, have trucks running off, it goes through the grass, it ruts it up, it kills the grass, it incurs additional maintenance expenses. It's not good for erosion. So we're trying to balance things.
Sure.
I wasn't talking about the truck entrance. I was talking about the standard vehicular one to the east, which sort of comes in and Y's out into the 2 parking lots. That whole circuit of asphalt is all 24 feet as well. There's no truck traffic on those lanes.
But this discussion is not particularly germane. I mean, what matters is where, what do the LDRs provide? Do they cover the issue or not?
I agree with you.
There is a reference I saw under the subdivision regulations related to private roads, and a 20-foot reference there. So,
Well, then that should be respected. It's simple.
This is, I don't think it's a subdivision.
This isn't a subdivision, it's not a private road, it's a driveway.
Yeah, it's not a private road, it's a driveway.
Private road would be a road that isn't deeded over to the city that serves 15 houses or some such like
Yeah.
that. This is a driveway.
No, I agree with you, this is a driveway.
So
just never had an
driveways
applicant
should be
argue this.
wider than private roads? That seems ridiculous.
Well, that's,
I'm sorry, we couldn't hear you.
The thought is to future-proof this development as well, there will be future additions onto this, so.
I'm not,
wait a minute.
And so will trucks eventually use this entrance as well?
listen, it's not likely intended that way, but you just don't know. And our thinking tells us this is what we should have. There's no prohibition against it, so I'm a little confused about this conversation.
So let's see if Marla can help us.
Yeah.
Is there a prohibition against a 24-foot wide driveway?
The LDRs do not speak to driveway widths. That being said, they speak to private roadway widths as 20 feet.
And what
I think that's our answer.
What our representation is, this is a private driveway. We're proposing it to be 24 feet as we did with our neighbor, which was approved. So I'm failing to see how would be any authority to compel us to go to 20 feet.
So let me ask you this, John, the Y, the vehicular entrance, could you shrink that down to 20 feet? Would you be willing to do that?
It's not what we would like to do, no.
I understand.
Let me ask, could I ask another question going to the regs, and I'm sorry not to be sufficiently familiar. This is a consolidated hearing that addresses not the subdivision, but the reforming into a single lot. To what extent do these subdivision regulations that I suppose govern the second part of this hearing address this issue?
That's a good question.
And is anything in the subdivision rules applicable to this issue if it's a given that it is not a quote private road?
So criteria 8 and 9 of the subdivision standards, oh boy, you've made me presenter and now I've lost what I was doing. It's okay. Criteria 8 and 9 of the subdivision regulations, which I will try very hard to zoom into, though it's not letting me, pertain to roads, recreation, stormwater facilities in a manner that's compatible with the extension of such services and adjacent properties, and designed in a manner that's consistent with city utility and roadway plans and maintenance standards. So there are criterias pertaining to site layout.
Is there anything in the subdivision regulations that address, I didn't see anything there about driveways. Is there anything in the subdivision regulation that is specific to driveways that addresses driveways at all? What's it say about driveways, if anything?
I don't believe it uses the word driveways.
Doesn't appear to reference driveways, and is the fire chief okay with it?
A wider road?
Yeah, the fire chief.
That is absurd. So in a way, this couldn't be more identical to FedEx ground right next door.
Well, except it isn't because it doesn't have the commercial vehicles.
Let me just finish.
Okay.
Can I add something? We've already talked about the snow plan, the plowing plan. We are gonna have to move fairly large vehicles, possible front-end loaders through that space. There's already a little bit of curvature there, so I think just by that measure, there would be a possible reason to have a little bit wider driveway. It's not just, passenger vehicles that are gonna be moving through that space. It's snow removal and various other maintenance vehicles as well. So, it's not just a residential street.
Thank you.
What I was about to say is next door at FedEx, there was the same dual application. It was a consolidation of 2.5 lots into a single lot. We have 3 into a single lot, and then a site plan review. We have a driveway. In that case, it was a singular driveway, which accommodated both cars and trucks, but it was a driveway. Nonetheless, in an application that had both the consolidation of lots and a site plan review, It's 24 feet wide, we're doing the same thing. If there was a valid reason to prohibit us from having a 24-foot wide driveway, we missed it on FedEx.
Let me ask you a question. The only one that occurs to me, other than because, is the any kind of runoff issue from additional hard space. How was your runoff handled for this property?
So, that's a great question. So stormwater management is a compulsory permit, as you know, from the state of Vermont. And we will have a stormwater management plan that meets all those requirements. In fact, at some point, we'll have more impervious surface when we do our phase 2. Your stormwater management plan has to meet all the requirements of the state stormwater management requirements.
So in summary, we don't have a specific prohibition, and so far no one's has articulated a real-world objection that we all recognize.
It's also important to note that the allowable lot coverage in this district is 70%. We're covering, I forget what the calculation is on the drawing, we're covering probably 30%.
Is that at this phase?
That's in this phase.
What is the ultimate?
Even our final build-out will be 20% under
Okay.
the maximum allowed. It's not even close.
Okay, just checking.
Okay,
Or less than half of current allowable.
This is a personal agenda item. This is not a LDR requirement.
I'm going to, this is a tough discussion. I'm going to call time, though. We're on top of 10 o'clock, and I guess we'll have to pick this up at the continued date. And in the meantime, can you work with staff to see if you can come to some agreement about this? Marla, what would you suggest?
Yeah, so we'll discuss it internally. Sometimes when we look at things together, some additional ideas come to mind.
Okay.
Don, if it's all right, we would like to leave as testimony the balance of our responses to Marla's comments,
Sure.
all of which were good comments, and we've responded to each one of those. So
Okay.
while we may not do it all right here, I'd like to submit that in writing to make sure that all the comments have been addressed.
That's great. I appreciate that, John. We can incorporate your responses
Yeah.
for the continued hearing, and it sounds like most of them are most of the actual plans have been updated, so we'll have a comprehensive review of all of the newly submitted things for the next hearing as well. And hopefully we can be quick.
What is the continued date?
January 4th, we've reserved some time for them.
So I would entertain a motion to continue this hearing to January 4th, when we will pick up the comments and have public comment.
I'll second.
I don't think we had a motion.
Oh, I thought that's what you just said.
Oh, did I move?
You can
Okay.
make
All right,
motions.
fine. All right, second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. Good. All right, thank you.
See you after the holidays.
So for minutes, are we going to skip item number 9, which is their final plat for now?
Yeah, do we have to formally continue that one as well?
We do have to formally continue that one.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we continue SD 2126
I'll second that.
to January 4th.
Yes. I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay.
So the minutes of November 2nd were available. I don't know if you have your bandwidth to talk about those. I just get concerned when they get too far out that no one's going to remember what happened. Do you think you have a little bit of bandwidth for the minutes?
I'm okay with them.
Yeah.
Okay.
November 4th, you said?
November
Second.
2nd.
Second, I make a motion to approve the minutes of November 2nd as drafted.
I'll second that. All in favor of, discussion? No? All in favor of approving the minutes of November 2nd? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I abstain.
Yeah, I was going to say
Okay.
Quinn and
Abstain. Okay.
Technically, you still can vote to approve them even if you weren't there for minutes.
And any other business?
Nope.
Okay. I never can remember. Do we need a motion to close? No.
No, you just tell us. You have the power.
It
You-
is.
This is where you need a gavel.
It is 10:02. We are done.
We'll bring the gavel next time. We
Yes.
have one
This
upstairs.
conference
Thank you
is
for your
no longer
patience, guys.